Hello, glad to see you on my channel. I really value it. And today I want to share with you a wonderful story. It's a dramatic story that will come as a total shock to everybody. It is a really amazing story. So enjoy watching it.
When he heard the phone ring, Dominic opened his eyes with difficulty and fumbled for the phone. The screen showed that it was his sister Anna calling. It was 2:30 in the morning. Something must have happened. Dominic knew that Anna's husband had recently been hospitalized with some kind of infection, but it had been a few days. He should have been discharged. He answered the phone. "Dominic, hi. Sorry to wake you up. Can you talk to me a little?" Almost crying, she asked. "Of course, Anna. What's wrong? Why are you crying? Is it something with Harry, or did you two have a fight?" "Dominic, he's dead." He heard sobbing on the other end of the line. It was like a weight had been lifted from his heart. "Dead? How? You said it was just a cold. You don't die of that." "Dominique, that's not all. I'll probably die soon too," said Anna and burst into tears, unable to hold back her emotions. "Anna, I'm sorry about your husband, but no one has ever died of grief. Everything will be all right. I'll be there tomorrow." "Dominique, you don't understand. He didn't die of a cold." "What did he die of?" "The doctor said he had HIV. I've taken a test, but I don't expect it to be all right." "HIV? I couldn't believe my ears," my brother asked. "But how? You've lived together for 5 years. Didn't you know anything about it?" "No, I was stunned when the doctor told me. Harry was getting worse and worse. They were taking tests for everything possible, and that's how they found out. He never even mentioned it once. But you couldn't have known. He had to be on medication. He had to be on medication." "Did you see any of that?" "He was taking some vitamins and supplements. I just didn't get into it. He was a bit of a health nut, but he never mentioned his diagnosis." "You bitch," Dominic swore. There were a lot of other words on his tongue, but his sister was already sobbing into the phone. There was no point in upsetting her even more. If he were alive, I'd strangle him myself. "Get in line," Anna said sadly in reply. She herself would have strangled her husband if he could still breathe. In 5 years, had she never once been told that he was HIV positive? It just didn't make sense to her. She loved this man. She married him. They were going to have a child together. "You bitch." "Anna, don't get upset beforehand. If he was on medication, you might not have gotten the disease." "Really? We never used protection. I'm pretty sure he gave me all his contagion." "Dominic, he wanted a baby. What the hell was he thinking? What if I'd gotten pregnant?" "You didn't." "No, I got tested. What difference does it make now? My life is over." "Okay, don't be ridiculous. It's not over. Even if you're sick, there's a cure for it now. You can live for a long time." "But how? I don't want to live." "Dominic, it's more than betrayal. He looked into my eyes every day. He smiled at me, he kissed me. He told me he loved me, and every day he slowly killed me. How's that?" "I'm sorry, little girl. That's a question I can't answer. It's just not in my head." "All right, here's the plan. You find some tranquilizers, take them, and then go to bed. I'll be on the first flight out in the morning. I'll book my ticket right now." "Okay. Are you sure you're coming?" she asked with such hope that her brother's heart sank. "Of course I'll see you soon. I haven't told my parents yet. You don't tell them either, okay?" "I won't. I have no idea how to break the news to them." "Okay, I'll see you tomorrow. Love you and take care of yourself." "Love you too," Anna said and passed out. Sedatives? She had never taken them before because she considered herself a perfectly happy person. She and Harry had married 5 years ago. She was 20 then, and he was 7 years older. Closing her eyes, Anna saw what he'd been like when they first met. Tall, handsome, so masculine in his look. He stirred her blood with a look and a smile. She fell in love with him at first sight, so when 2 months after meeting him, he offered her hand and heart, she agreed. It seemed that such love is written only in books. Harry was great at everything. He was a passionate husband, a wonderful family man, a man with golden hands. He could fix things that would be easier to throw away. And now all this pales after one single word, HIV. Anna could not even mourn his passing because she was angry to the pulse. Of course, many people with such a diagnosis live for many years, but there are certain rules. She had been told about HIV at school many years ago. The teacher had told her that it was not a verdict, but also that it was necessary to protect oneself, to take some pills to avoid contact with blood. Anna did not know whether her husband had taken HIV medication, but apparently he had, since he had lived so long. If it hadn't been for the COVID, she wouldn't have known he had another disease. It wasn't a common cold. And that's what crippled her husband and also revealed his secret. A terrible secret. And now how do you move on? People who have never faced such a problem often think that HIV sounds like a sentence. But these are just words. When you learn something like this about yourself, it is not just a sentence, it is a blow under the breath, which makes your eyes dark and your knees bounce. And the worst thing is that she was hit by a man in whom she had loved for many years. Her husband. Anna had no doubt she was sick. Not only unprotected contact, but other little things that were embarrassing to even talk about. She had no doubt that the result would be positive or false negative. Lately, she had been bleeding sometimes after a stormy cupcake with her husband. She'd been meaning to go to the women's doctor, but hadn't had the time. It seemed like such a small thing, but now, her head was exploding with 1,000 different thoughts. She felt like her life was over. Sedatives? She couldn't find them at home, but in her search she found a bottle of cognac. Anna poured herself a shot and downed it in one gulp. She wanted at least a little to dull the pain that was eating her from the inside. 1 second, third. After the fourth one, her head became quieter and calmer, but not all the emotions had subsided. Then the fifth and sixth, and then she didn't notice how she passed out right at the table in the kitchen. Anna woke up because someone was banging on the door, probably with her feet. Through her headache, she remembered that her brother Dominic was coming and went to let him in. "You look awful," he said as he entered the apartment and immediately hugged her sister tightly, but she tried to pull away. It seemed to Anna that even a normal hug could make her brother sick, though she realized that wasn't true. It was just that she loved Dominic so much that she couldn't allow even the slightest possibility of hurting him. Big brother. He had always been her rock. They might have fought a lot when they were kids, but as they grew older, they realized the power of kinship. She could talk to him about anything. He's her older brother. "Thank you for coming, little brother," she said sadly and invited him into the living room. The rooms were not cleaned. For the last few days, Anna had almost lived in the hospital. Harry's things were still lying around, as if trying to remind her of what had happened. She wanted to throw all reminders of him out of the house, and preferably out of her body too. "Anna, have you called the hospital yet? When are the results coming back?" "They said they'd call. The doctor said it wouldn't be long, 1 or 2 days. I still can't get my head around it." "Me neither." My head was splitting apart, and yesterday's anxiety and fear for my own life have returned. Remembering how the alcohol had made her feel better yesterday, Anna wanted to drink again, but it was still noon on the clock. "When is the funeral?" he asked gently. Anna sighed. "I have to bury that bastard, and that's not cheap." "Couldn't you just throw his corpse in the river?" she joked angrily. "I'm afraid it won't work." Dominic liked the idea, but he realized that he could go to jail for such a thing. "No, we have to do it properly." "Do I have to bury him? He killed me, and I have to." "Anna, don't give up on yourself. Maybe you'll slip up again. I wish I had your hope, but I'm sure you don't. Have you ever buried anyone?" "What do you have to do?" she asked. "No, but I think if you call the funeral home, they'll do it themselves." "Maybe you're right." Anna picked up the phone, found a website offering similar services, and called them. After a short discussion of details, they managed to organize the funeral for tomorrow. "Will you come to choose a coffin and accessories?" asked a pleasant male voice in the receiver. "All the cheapest and darkest," she replied. "Will you do it?" "Yes, all your wishes will be taken into account. I'm sorry," said the same voice, and then the call disconnected. "It's so simple," Anna said to her brother, surprised and sad. "I sent you money to your card, even for the cheapest thing you'll have to pay." "Thank you, you didn't have to. He doesn't deserve your help." "I'm not helping him. I'm helping you." "Thank you." "Anna, we have to tell your parents." Dominic suggested it delicately. "At least that he's dead. And I have to play the grieving widow at the funeral. If my parents find out about HIV, it would break their hearts. I don't have to tell them yet." If I don't tell them, they'll be just like him. Anna, it's up to you, but I have to call. She thought for a while and decided to tell her parents only about her husband's funeral and to tell them about everything else when they arrived. She didn't want anyone to have a heart attack. There weren't many doctors in their village after all. It's safer in the city. My mother wailed for a long time when she heard the sad news, but my father only sighed. How could it be? How could it be? So young. A little to 33 did not live. After taking a break from talking to her parents, Anna called Harry's family. His mother was sobbing into the phone, and his father was only gravely silent, but you could see in his eyes that he was in shock. "Come back tomorrow or tonight," said the daughter-in-law at the end. "Of course, Anna, we'll come. Now we'll transfer money to you, so that there will be enough for everything." And they also sent a few thousand to Anna's card. When she saw the amount on her account, she even smiled. The rest of the day passed like a blur. Anna and Dominic drove over to that bureau to make sure everything was in order. She warned that the staff needed to be careful because they were burying someone with HIV. She didn't know if she should have said that, but she wanted to warn them just in case. Harry's sister Alice arrived in the evening. Anna had liked her a lot before, and they had even become friends. But now her hatred for her husband was slowly spreading like an invisible veil to the other members of his family, enveloping them in some kind of net or cocoon. "Mom and Dad will be here first thing tomorrow morning. I went earlier to help you," said my sister-in-law sadly. "You don't need to help anymore," Anna replied dryly, and then she couldn't stand it any longer and asked, "Did you know Harry has HIV?" She realized from Alice's eyes that her sister knew, but how could she? "I didn't know, but I guessed." "What do you mean?" Anna asked indignantly. "Before you, he lived with a woman for about a year. She was 2 years older than him. She had 2 children. Harry broke up with her when he found out she was HIV positive." "Did it occur to you to tell my sister?" Dominic asked. Harry said he'd been tested, that he was clean. Alice seemed to be speaking honestly. "I didn't think he caught the disease." "He lied to you," Anna said angrily. "So did I. But at least you could guess, and no one even hinted to me." "I'm sorry, Anna. If I had known, I would have told you. Somehow I believe you." "Okay. And you?" My sister-in-law asked me gently. "Did you take the tests?" "Yes, the results won't be back until tomorrow. I called there today." "I wish everything was all right," said Alice and looked up as if she was talking to God. "I don't have much hope for that, to be honest." "I'll pray." "What's the use?" Dominic snorted. "Prayers can't help you." "I'll pray anyway." "How about a little drink?" Anna suggested, barely able to live with the thought until the evening. The rest of the evening they sat, drank and snacked, but did not talk much. Usually, when someone dies, relatives gather around the table and remember different stories about the deceased. Mostly good, kind, or funny. Of course, there had been many such stories in Anna and Harry's lives too, but she didn't want to remember them now. She didn't want to remember at all. She wanted to forget everything and anything. She was so angry that sometimes she felt like she was going to suffocate from that anger. Dominic saw what was happening to her, tried to tell her something, but had no idea how to comfort her. At least he tried to distract her from her sad thoughts. It was already 11:30 when he suggested to his sister and the guests that they go to rest. Anna was already pecking her nose in the table, so she agreed at once, and Alice suddenly said, "Anna, could you not tell your parents about HIV? I'm asking you very much. They are already in shock. We can't let them know the whole truth. My father won't survive it. He won't understand. He'll curse Harry and he'll never find his place in the world. Please don't tell them the whole truth." "Can you do that? Are you serious now?" Anna asked, a little sobered by Alice's request. "Yes, I realize it's a terrible request, but please, don't tell him. If you're worried about your brother's afterlife, it's for nothing. He's not going to find a comfortable place there anyway. I've already cursed him," Anna said angrily and went to bed. Alice only looked at her back in horror. All this did not fit in her head. It would seem that her brother's death was a terrible loss, but it was all so complicated. The request of her sister-in-law made Anna so angry that she could not sleep for a long time. Her mind was so foggy, but sleep refused to take over her body and brain. She lay there and against her will remembered how recently her husband slept on the neighboring pillow. He had told her every day before going to bed that he loved her. But could one love a man and lie to him about such things? Hardly. It seemed as if one horrible day had crossed off 5 years of life together. All of Harry's words seemed empty now, and he himself seemed to her like an empty shell with no feelings and no soul. When she finally fell asleep, the peace of mind did not overtake her, for she had dreamed of her late husband. Harry looked so calm, but as if he was angry. "How could you?" she asked him. "How could you not tell me anything?" "Why should I have?" he answered dryly. "It's my life. Don't you understand?" "What about mine?" "Nobody told me it would be like this either. And you decided to take revenge on the universe through me. Perhaps. It's inhuman. I agree. Don't you care that I might be dead soon?" "Well, I'm dead." Anna woke up realizing she was in tears. She remembered the dream as if it had really happened. She felt even heavier. Of course, she realized that it was just a dream, but she had so often had dreams that had come true. Well, she believed in the power of dreams. Perhaps Harry had come to her to say goodbye, but not to apologize. Bastard. Early in the morning, the family began to gather. Anna and Dominic's parents were the first to arrive. They were dressed in dark clothes, looking sad. "Daughter, we'll help you. Don't worry. Everything will be all right. Time heals." "Thank you, Mommy. I know you're here for me. Thank you." Anna only answered, feeling as if she was saying what was customary or what she wanted to hear. Her father only hugged his daughter tightly, trying to take away all her pain with his strong arms, and then whispered in her ear, "I love you so much." It was so touching, she even had tears in her eyes. "I love you too, Daddy," she said and kissed his shoulder. She thought that if she just touched her skin to her family, she would pass her disease on to them. She knew that wasn't true, but it just seemed impossible to get rid of the feeling. Soon Harry's parents arrived. His mother was inconsolable. Julian was sobbing and screaming, unable to comprehend what was happening. Where is he? Where is he?" his father-in-law asked. "Harry?" "Yes, it's customary to have a sleepover at home before." "No, you'll meet him at the cemetery." Anna answered, only trying to hide the anger inside her. "We live on the 4th floor without an elevator. Who would drag him here?" In fact, she had no such thoughts. She didn't want to see his face all night, didn't want to know he was around. In her mind, Anna had already buried him and cursed him. "It's not human," resented her mother-in-law. Alice now and then suspiciously looked at her daughter-in-law, hoping that she had enough wisdom and tact not to dump on her parents all the sins of their son. "Well, as it is," Anna only said and went to her room. She closed the door, but soon Dominic came to her, leaving the parents to talk among themselves. The funeral was to be held at noon. They were still over 3 hours away. Anna tried to figure out how to survive this time so that she wouldn't kill anyone or die herself from the emotions tearing at her soul. Grief. No, she didn't have that feeling at all, but she had to play the part, though it was not working out well. Dominic could see the anger and resentment in almost every look she gave him. He didn't know if his sister planned to tell her family, but he thought that was a decision only she could make. "Come on, it'll be weird if you sit here the whole time until the funeral." Anna looked glumly at her brother, thought a little, and then answered, "I don't care. Go to them if you want. I can't be there yet. Really go, or they'll start breaking into the room soon. Will you be okay?" "Yeah, I'll be fine." As soon as Dominic was out the door, Anna pulled out the rest of the whiskey she'd stashed away from the dresser from last night's feast. She took a big gulp straight from the bottle and then another. Afterward, she lay in bed and pulled the blanket up to her chin. She wanted oblivion. She wanted this day to be over as soon as possible, but no, she would have to live through it all. Dominic managed to convince his parents that he shouldn't touch his sister, that she wanted to be alone. They didn't agree right away, but then they decided they could give her some freedom. Mother-in-law was more difficult to convince, but Alice at her own risk persuaded her mother not to touch her sister-in-law, say she is in sorrow. At the beginning of 12, Anna herself came out of the room. She was wearing a beautiful black dress with lace sleeves. She did not braid her hair, but brushed it so as not to look like a total lame ass. By then, the living room was filled with people. Harry's cousin, a couple of his friends, his school friend Angelica, and his aunt and uncle had arrived. They all looked so sad and depressed, and Anna was a little tipsy, so she took a couple more sips of whiskey before joining the others. The funeral director knew his business. A hearse with Harry's body arrived at the driveway at the exact time specified, and then the crowd followed him to the cemetery in a rented bus. When Julian saw the coffin in which her son was buried, she looked at her daughter-in-law strangely, but she didn't say anything out loud, just gave her a judgmental glance, saying, "You found something to save money on." Recently, they had buried her husband's mother, so the mother-in-law knew what and how. She saw that Anna had chosen the cheapest things for their beloved son. After a while, everyone stood in the cemetery near the freshly dug grave. The bishop was singing the funeral, waving his smoking censer. Some specially ordered women were singing to him, and others were kneeling and crying. Apparently, all this was part of the service, but none of it touched the widow's heart. When everything was quiet for a few seconds, Anna's phone rang as if out of spite. The sound of the message seemed to break the silence and drew the crowd's eyes to her. She opened the message. It was an email alert from the clinic where she had taken the tests. "Your tests are ready. You can see the result in your personal cabinet at the link." Anna's trembling hand clicked on that link and opened the file. The result was positive. The message was the last straw. Anna's patience ran out. It had been cracking at the seams before, but now it burst like a balloon inflated too much. She screamed as if someone had kicked her again. The people in the cemetery stared at her in surprise, not understanding what was wrong. Anna had already run out to pounce on the coffin and slap her late husband, but Dominic was just in time to grab her and squeeze her in his arms. "What's going on?" was heard from the crowd. "Has she gone mad with grief? Poor girl. What happened?" People whispered or chattered in their voices, and Anna continued to scream in her brother's arms. It seemed to her that she had learned not just that she had tested positive for HIV, but that she was going to die tomorrow, and she would die because of her husband's betrayal. No, it was more than betrayal. If he were alive, he could be condemned for what he did. I mean, prosecuted, but he's already dead. "I hate him. I hate him," Anna said, pressing her face into her brother's chest. "I hate him." Dominic took her aside so that no one could hear her words. They stood 20 meters away from everyone else, and she continued to cry as she suddenly noticed a familiar face. She had seen this woman before, but where? Anna frantically tried to remember who it was, but the woman had spotted her too, so she decided to make a quick getaway so she wouldn't be spotted by anyone else. It was her. Anna remembered as she watched the stranger walk away. Who is she? It's his ex-girlfriend, the one who infected him. I saw her in the picture. Anna rushed after her, but her brother grabbed her again. "Let her go. Anna, you don't need this right now." She collapsed in his arms, realizing she no longer had the strength to resist. More than anything, she wanted to leave this place, forget about the wake, her family, and friends. To tell everyone to go to hell. "Could we not go to the cafeteria?" she asked her brother, looking pleadingly into his eyes. "Anna, just half an hour, okay, then we'll leave." "I don't want to. I don't want to go either, but we have to. Will you be patient? I can't take it anymore." "At least try. I know it's hard for you. Dominique, you have no idea. I'm sorry for your loss, but not for his death. You know what I mean. It's like you're burying me." "No, I'm just sorry for what happened. You'll see a doctor, you'll get treatment, you'll live a long time. It's not over." "I don't believe that for some reason. I try to believe it with all my heart. I'm not going in there," she said, looking at the ceremony. "We'll stand here." He agreed, but after a minute the mother-in-law came to them. "Anna, let's go. They're going to lower it now," she said insistently. All this time she was watching her daughter-in-law and was terribly angry with her. It is necessary such rudeness. She behaved at the funeral like a mad woman. It was strange for her to see her daughter-in-law behaving like that. As far as Julian knew, the children lived well, loved each other, and now she had that look in her eyes. Her mother-in-law didn't understand what was wrong. "I'll stay here," Anna said idly. "No, you're coming with me." Julian answered and grabbed her arm, but immediately she felt Dominique's hand on her elbow. Don't touch your sister. It's a disgrace. Can't you give my son a proper burial? Contemptuously threw her mother-in-law. Anna could not stand it and hissed. Your son died because he was HIV infected. He gave me this disease too. If you want to bury him with all the honors, then go ahead, and I don't care. I don't care if they throw him off a cliff. Julian just slammed her eyes shut in surprise. She seemed to forget how to breathe for a second. Her feet against her will lead her away from her unreasonable daughter-in-law, who dared to slander her favorite son so unmercifully. In the eyes of the mother-in-law froze silent horror. Seeing her, Alice guessed that Anna could not stand it and told the truth. Alice walked over to her mother and took her under the elbow as if trying to comfort her. When it was over and people were crowding toward the bus, her father-in-law walked over to Anna and told her very quietly, Julian asked that you not go to the wake. I don't know what happened between you two there, but Anna didn't let him finish. I didn't feel like it. She left and walked in the other direction, getting farther away from the bus with each step. Dominic followed her. For about 10 minutes they just walked and were silent, and then she sat down on the pavement and burst into tears. Emotions overpowered her. Dominic, am I going to die now? I already said no. You will live, soothed her brother. But what kind of life is that? I wanted children so much. And you can still have more. I Googled it. He knew his sister had always loved babies. When they were still babies, she often fiddled with the littlest ones at playgrounds. She was one of those women who was literally made for motherhood. I want a drink, she said quietly. Dominic called a cab and drove the sister home. They bought a bottle of cognac and some food at the store near the house because her refrigerator was almost empty. Sitting in the kitchen with her brother, Anna was glad that she did not have to sit at the wake now and look into the eyes of her parents-in-law and Alice. I wish they had not come to say goodbye, but had gone home at once, she said aloud, though it seemed to her that she had only thought it. They might stay the night. Uncle Norman's driving. Maybe he won't drink. He'd already had a drink here before everyone left. It's a shame. Anna's parents were surprised not to see their daughter at her husband's wake. Amanda looked at her husband as if trying to ask him what was wrong, but he just shrugged. Julian, do you know where my Anna is? She asked, walking over to her sister-in-law. I don't know. She heard a cold answer. You brought up your daughter badly. What are you talking about? That. No, if you said that, you better explain. Amanda insisted, glaring at her opponent. On a day like this, my mother-in-law couldn't take it, and to slander my boy like that. Do you have any idea what your soul said? She said that my Harry had HIV, and that's why he died. She also said that he infected her, but that's a lie. What? Amanda asked, her eyes wide. What are you talking about? Norman was standing nearby and heard everything, as did everyone else in the dining room. Mother, what are you talking about? He asked his wife. I heard what I heard. Warmed the snake on your chest, and it stung on a day like this. Choose your words, growled Anna's father. You're talking about our daughter, and you don't yell at my wife. Norman shouted and grabbed the matchmaker by the chest, began to shake him, as if trying to shake him out of his soul, but he was not confused and put his fist right in his eye. The men started fighting. Harry's friends tried to break them up, but they got hit a couple times too. Julian ran up, trying to pull her husband away from Archie, but Norman inadvertently pushed her and knocked her to the floor. Then Amanda came over, but not too close, and asked tearfully, Archie, stop all this outrage. It was as if Archie woke up from a dream and backed away. He got off Norman and let him go, and he crawled to his wife, who was still lying on the floor, trying to get up. Alice tried to help her mother, but Julian had gotten so fat lately that it was not easy to lift her. Damn you all to hell, she yelled in frustration. Your whole family. My son is gone, and you're doing this. How the hell can you people be here? The wake was over before it could begin. They didn't even have time to drink a glass for the deceased, but everyone was fighting. Archie definitely went to one of the tables, drank 50 grams, and said loudly, God rest his soul. Then he took his wife under his arm and led her out of the dining room. They called a cab and drove to Anna's house. It was necessary to find out whether all this was true or not. When they arrived, they saw their grown-up children sitting at the same table and drinking brandy. Yes, this is not the kind of sight that loving parents dream of, but now it seemed quite appropriate. "Pour one for me too?" Archie asked his son. "A little for me too," said Amanda. "Anna, is it true?" "It's true," replied the daughter sadly and cried. Her mother looked at her with such sympathy, her daughter just couldn't stand it. Amanda came closer and hugged her tightly, then said softly, "Don't worry, it's not over yet." They sat and talked for a long time trying to figure out how this happened, but they never found any answers. 2 hours later, Anna's father-in-law, who had been drinking heavily, showed up at her apartment. Apparently, the wake had gone according to plan, although without a few extra people. Alice stood behind, shamefully lowered her eyes. She was angry at her sister-in-law, but in some ways she understood her. Anna opened the door silently and stepped back a little, allowing them to enter because their things were still in the apartment. Julian only gave her a disdainful look and went to her room to get her bag. She had brought her things with her for change, for she planned to stay here for the night. She had her husband's purse on the table in the living room with his driver's license and other documents in it. "I'm sorry," said Alice, looking over her father's shoulder. "You're apologizing too." Her father growled at her and then looked at his daughter-in-law with such a fierce hatred that she felt uncomfortable. "Dad, it's all true," only answered his daughter. "What difference does it make?" he said dryly. At that moment, Juliana came out of the living room with her belongings, and then Harry's parents and sister went to the hotel to spend the night. Her friends left without even saying goodbye to Anna, but she wasn't too upset about it. The people she wanted to see were there for her. Her parents stayed with Anna for 2 more days, and then they went home. She asked them to. She promised that she would definitely go to the hospital and start treatment. Dominic stayed with her for about a week and then went home too. The only thing that bothered him at that moment was his sister's new addiction. Not a single evening was without alcohol. He thought it was her way of drowning her sorrows, but he was afraid she would continue to drink, and that was bad enough. "Anna, stop drinking, okay?" he asked her before he left. "Yes, that's it. It's prohibition now. Tomorrow I'll go to the hospital," she promised. But as soon as the evening came, she felt heavy again, and she went to the store for another dose of sedatives. She didn't go to the hospital the next day, and she didn't go a week later either. It seemed to her that it was bearable, that there was still time. She wanted some control over her emotions. Alcohol helped with that, she thought, but soon she didn't notice how she became addicted to the green snake. At first she drank only in the evenings, but then she started to drink in the morning. At work, she took a month's vacation at her own expense. She drank the whole month. There was money her parents had given for her husband's funeral and her brother, and Harry's friends too. Some of it she spent, but some of it was left over. At some point, she got bored drinking alone at home, so Anna went to a bar. There were so many people there. Some were having fun. Some were sad, like her, but it was surprisingly pleasant to be among people, even though they were strangers. Anna was a pretty young woman. Even a month's alcoholic haze had not affected her appearance. Apparently, youth was to blame. If she were 30 or 40 years old, there would have been traces of drunkenness on her face, but not so, fresh as a rose. No wonder that after a few minutes some man sat down to her. "Hi, do you miss me?" he asked. "No, I'm bored," she confessed honestly, having already had a couple of drinks. "Can I keep you company?" "It's not busy here," she replied indifferently. "You're beautiful?" "I know. Can I buy you a drink?" "Go ahead." They hardly spoke, but a few more shots literally knocked Anna off her feet. I wish she'd stayed home. She would have just crawled to bed, as usual, and fallen asleep, but she had to get home somehow. Her new acquaintance's name was Max. He was nice and sweet all night. He told her things, but she didn't really listen to him. It was just nice to have someone around, but then she was lost in a fog again, coming to her senses from time to time. "Where are we going?" she asked, realizing she was sitting in the car. "To my place." "I don't want to." "We can go to your place. Take me home, please." "Where do you live?" She gave me an address. That bar was not far from her house, but they had already traveled far enough. "I don't want to go back. You're going home tomorrow. Max, it's better for you if you take me home. Threatening me? He smiled. Don't worry, I won't do anything you don't ask. Anna closed her eyes for a second and fell back into some strange eclipse. When she came to herself again, she was lying on the sofa in his apartment, and Max was sitting against it, sipping whiskey from a cut glass. Where am I? You're at my place. I want to go home. And you will soon. He put his glass on the table and walked over to her, sat down on the couch and smiled. But first, we'll get to know each other a little better. Anna wanted to say she didn't want to, but didn't have time to do it. A single slap knocked her out again, and when she woke up, she realized what had happened. It would have been better to stay home. She was cursing herself so much. I hope you at least had the sense to put a rubber band on. What did you have to do? He asked mockingly. Well, yes, I have HIV. Anna just answered, not knowing what was waiting for her next. Hearing Anna's words, Max's face changed as if he had gone mad. He was so angry that he could not control himself. The blows came one after another, while he called her the last words. She was terrified. The pain was so intense that she stopped thinking. When he dragged her by the leg out of his apartment, Anna had already lost consciousness. She woke up in the street not far from his house, but she had no idea where she was. It was dawn, not a soul around. Her jeans and her bag were lying next to her, and after rummaging through them, she found her cell phone and called a cab by geolocation. The car arrived 10 minutes later. Once home, Anna tried to make sense of everything that had happened. She was sorry for what had happened, but at least she had warned the man that there could be consequences. Strangely, she felt only her own guilt, forgetting that he had taken her against her will. She would have been better off staying home, she said to herself as she showered. She'd better stay home. That story had discouraged her from drinking every night. When the bruises on her face and body had faded a little, Anna went to the hospital to find out about HIV treatment. A polite infectious disease specialist explained her treatment plan in detail and prescribed the necessary medications. We need to take additional tests. I will write you directions, and then we will start. Okay? Yes, of course, she replied, collecting various papers from the table. The same day she took the tests because she had not eaten or drunk since the morning, and then she went home. The vacation at work was already over, but she took a sick leave because in such a state it was impossible to go to work. Her face was bruised and her body was breaking. At the clinic where she took the sick leave, she did not tell about the reason for her beatings, so no one reported her to the police. A week later, she received a call back from the hospital where she was being treated for HIV, and the doctor scheduled another appointment. When Anna arrived, he told her some not so pleasant news. You are pregnant. She looked at the doctor with horror, as if he had told her she would die tomorrow. There's no need to be so frightened. If we start treatment right now, you have a good chance of having a healthy baby. How can that be? It's early in the pregnancy. It could work out. No, I want an abortion. It's up to you. But if you want to do it just because you're HIV positive, don't. Anna left the doctor's office dazed and hopeful at the same time. She didn't care at all how the child was conceived. She had always wanted to be a mother and never understood women who killed their babies. If the doctor assured her it would work, why not give it a try? After 2 days of hard thinking, she made the decision to have this baby. The sorrowful thoughts she had while drinking screamed that she could never be happy with another man again. No one would want her, and she could not do to someone what her husband had done to her. After informing her doctor of her decision, Anna began treatment, carefully following all his instructions. She was 2 months pregnant when her mother-in-law called her unexpectedly. Without even asking how things were going, she put her in front of the fact. We are our son's heirs. Soon you'll get a summons to court. The apartment will have to be divided or you can pay us our shares. Anna almost choked with indignation, but she was not confused. What apartment do you mean? The one you're living in now. Really? Have you lost your memory? It's my apartment. Bought during the marriage, so it is common, insisted mother-in-law. The apartment was bought by my parents. That won't hold up in court. Really? Well, let's go to court, just replied daughter-in-law and hung up the phone. Of course, she should have told Juliana that the apartment was not only bought by her parents, but also formalized a gift, so nothing in laws will not break, but she did not do it. Let her mom embarrass herself when she goes to court. Harry had his own apartment, but when they married, he sold it because he was going to live with Anna for the rest of his life. He invested the money in the business of a friend of his, but he went bust and the money was gone. Julian had nothing to count on, but she didn't know it yet. And everything would be fine. But the conversation with her mother-in-law reminded Anna that she had not yet found the answers to those questions that tormented her when she was drinking like hell. Hoping that Alice was not yet aware of her mother's scam, Anna called her. "Hey, do you have a minute?" "Hi, yes, how are you?" Sister-in-law asked. "I'm fine, I started to heal. I hope to live a little longer." "That's good. Did you want something?" "Yes, I was wondering if you had the number or address of the woman Harry lived with before me. I know she lives in the same village as our parents. I'm near your house right now, by the way. Can I drop by?" Anna was a little taken aback at the suggestion, but agreed. 15 minutes later, there was a knock at the door. Alice looked either guilty or upset. "Hi, can you let me in?" she just asked. "Hi, come in." "Anna, I wanted to apologize to you for our parents. They still don't believe what happened, but I'm afraid to imagine how much they hurt you with their behavior." "Apology accepted, but only from you. No offense," replied the daughter-in-law, or rather already ex, or are they not exes? "Would you like some tea?" "Yes, that would be great." They went to the kitchen. Anna made tea and took out of the refrigerator recently bought pie with poppy seeds. "So why do you want this, Selena?" Alice asked, taking a bite. "I have questions. I can't live with myself until I find the answers." "What makes you think she can help you?" "Because I saw her at the funeral." "What?" My sister-in-law looked very surprised. "But how did she know? Who told her?" "That's one of the questions." That's very strange. I also think that even after we got married, Harry kept in touch with her." "But why?" "That's another one of the questions. And the others?" "I don't understand why he didn't tell me. I don't believe he was that selfish. And even if he was, shouldn't the doctors have told me? Isn't it recorded anywhere?" "I don't know." "Was he treated at all? What was he taking?" "I have 1,000 questions, and I feel like this Selena should know the answers." "But what makes you think they were in touch?" "I don't know. I used to ignore it, but sometimes he'd hide his phone when someone was texting. It was kind of casual. It didn't stick out. I didn't think much of it then, but now. If she hadn't come to the funeral, I wouldn't have connected it all together, but now." Alice thought about her words for a moment, then suggested, "Anna, I have a car. Let's go to her together. I have questions now too." After about an hour or a little more, Alice's car pulled up to the village where her parents lived. She decided to take a little detour so as not to pass her house. On the road, the girls were silent most of the time. What else was there to discuss? Neither of them knew if they'd ever find that Selena at home, but they could at least leave a note for her to call back. It was her day off. She might not be working. Anna went to the door of the house first and knocked on it confidently. A boy of about 14 years of age opened the door. "Hello, who are you?" he asked, looking at the strangers. "Is your mom home?" "Mom!" the boy shouted and stepped away from the door. Soon a young and very pretty woman came out. Blonde hair, green eyes, slim and trim. She didn't look sick at all. In fact, neither did Anna now. "Son, go and look after your brother and sister, please," Selena asked, realizing perfectly well who had come to see her. "Good afternoon, what can I do for you?" "Can we talk?" Anna asked, drilling her with her gaze. "Not here. Wait a few minutes, I'll be right out. There's a place nearby." Alice nodded, and Anna just turned around and walked to the car. A few minutes later, Selena came out and got in with them. "Drive straight ahead. Do you know where the gazebos are near the pond?" "Yes," Alice answered and started the car. When they were comfortably seated in one of the gazebos at a wooden table, Selena asked first, "Why did you come here?" "I have questions," Anna answered, trying to remain calm. She was pounding inside for some reason, but she couldn't understand what was wrong. Why is the sky blue? Who will be the next president? Was it true what Vanga said? Selena joked inappropriately. More simply, how did you know about the funeral? Alice sat silent for the time being. She wasn't comfortable either. I happened to meet Norman the night before the funeral. He told me Harry was dead. I wanted to at least get a glimpse of him and see him off. Did you love him that much? We become good friends lately. Oh yeah. Okay, let's say we were. Do you know if he's in treatment or not? Are you sick too? I'm asking questions today, but yes, you can congratulate me. Selena looked at her sympathetically, smiled sadly, and said, I won't congratulate you, but I will answer your questions. Harry didn't want to go to the hospital, even a private one, but he was taking tests. What's that? Where? I'm a lab technician. I gave him the test myself. I've done them every 3 months since the day he said he wanted to live with me, no matter what. How come he knew you were HIV positive but still wanted to be with you? Anna asked. Because he is an educated man and knows that HIV is not transmitted in the home, and we were very careful about other things. And yet he got sick. It happens too. There's no 100% guarantee, but Harry thought there was. When he found out he was HIV positive, he said he didn't want to see me anymore and left. And then he came back 2 or 3 months later, I don't remember, and asked me what he should do. I told him I could help him. With what? With tests and treatment. Are you a doctor? No, but I know where to get the right drugs. Did you steal from the hospital? No, there are other opportunities. Are you talking about the black market? Anna was surprised. Something like that. There are people who supply medicines for all tastes. You just have to know where to find them. And did you? Yes. And when he told you he was married, did it occur to you to tell me? Anna asked resentfully. I wanted to, but I didn't. He asked me not to, then he threatened me, said he'd put me away for doing tests on HIV-infected people without the hospital's knowledge, that he'd rat out my connections with dealers. Vested interests everywhere, right? He promised he'd be extra careful. Plus, if someone's in treatment, it's almost impossible to infect anyone. I know that. Oh yeah? Well, he got sick first, and then I did. And I'm sorry you didn't have the same choice he did. Sorry? Well, did you know that he wanted kids, so we didn't use birth control for the last 2 years? Selena's face stretched with bewilderment. That can't be true. Why can't it be? He had a vasectomy when he found out about his diagnosis. He traveled to another region to some private clinic. A vasectomy. Anna blinked in bewilderment. Then it turns out. I don't believe it. And what? Alice couldn't stand it. Then it turns out that he wanted to infect me on purpose. But why? I don't know that. Selena answered. I never thought he could do that, but he's been very strange lately. What do you mean? It's like he started taking something, and he hasn't come to pick up his medication a few times. I'd call, and he'd say he'd gotten it somewhere else. Then he'd come back again. I was worried about him. That's very humane. I'll give you that. Anna, I'm really sorry. I was just trying to help him. I didn't want him to get worse, but after he sold the apartment and blew his money, he got kind of depressed. Anna lowered her eyes and stared at the table for a few minutes. The monstrous thought occurred to her that her husband had decided to infect her in order to bind her to himself finally, so that she would not end up on the street if she happened to find out about everything. But could it have been true? It was unlikely that even Celine knew the answers to those questions. How long have you been on your own? Anna asked. For 8 years now, a little more. As you can see, I live. Aren't you afraid for the children? No, I know exactly how to avoid infection. I got infected when I already had children. Lucky, Anna said, but it sounded sad. One could hardly guess from her appearance now that she was pregnant. Though Anna had no plans to hide it, she just didn't think they were the right people to be honest about it, and she didn't want to answer the question of who the father was. Do you need help? Selena asked. With what? Doing fake tests or getting drugs? Thanks, I'm not proud. I went to the hospital. You did the right thing. I urged him to register too, but Harry didn't want to hear about it. I wonder why, the girls asked in unison. I think it's because of his father. Well, I guess it's your father, Selena admitted. What does our dad have to do with it? Alice asked in surprise. Anna also did not understand anything, only stared intently at the blonde, with whom her late husband was once in love. Are you sure you want to know? Selena asked. Yes, I do. Harry met me for a reason. I was first courted by your father. I don't know why he liked me. We met by chance. He started stalking me. He was literally stalking me. I tried to tell him I wasn't interested, but he wouldn't let it go. Somehow Harry found out about it. He came into my life too, but unlike Norman, I liked him immediately. I didn't find out they were related until much later. Are you saying that my father wanted to cheat on my mother with you? Yes, and I'm afraid that's what made Harry interested. He wouldn't back down even when I told him I had HIV. He told me he loved me and was there for me, for better or for worse. Now I think he wasn't being completely honest. He just wanted to get his daddy away from me so mommy wouldn't be alone. Selena said it with such irony, purposely calling her parents diminutive words. Alice blinked perplexedly, trying to comprehend all of this. Was it all of her father's fault? If he hadn't looked on the side, his brother wouldn't have gotten involved with Selena, wouldn't have gotten sick and infected Anna. Obviously, the chain is too complicated and complicated. But did you love my brother? Very much. Selena answered cautiously, glancing at Anna. And have you two been in touch in the last few months? Yes, I wrote to him several times. He didn't come for his medicine again. I wanted to bring it myself, but he sent me away. He told me not to call him anymore and stay out of his life. Why? Did he say anything to you? All I know is that at first the medications I got him were making him feel better, but then he started to notice side effects and it pissed him off. Anna remembered how her husband had complained several times about liver pain, and he had also had problems with potency lately. It would seem, who doesn't? But he was always very angry about the latter. Alice sat in a kind of bewilderment. The little child inside her was slowly dying. It always seemed to her that the parents love each other, that they almost have the strongest family in the world, but it turned out that the father was quite different. It felt as if Alice had never really known him. Can I ask how you got infected yourself? She asked Selena. At work, accidentally. I was assigned a student intern in the lab. She was a cranky little thing. She helped. Contaminated blood got in my eyes. I still wonder how you can be so crooked and dumb, especially when you choose a profession like that. The most interesting thing is that not even a drop got on her, and after a while I was convinced that I had also sailed. I started treatment. I always thought that only drug addicts or promiscuous people got HIV. Oh, you don't even realize how many people with HIV there are among the medical staff who also got infected absolutely accidentally. There are many people like Anna who were infected by their husbands. And by the way, some of them, unlike Harry, don't even realize they're sick for a long time. When they find out, they shock not only themselves, but the whole family. People with HIV do not advertise their status. They live under a veil of lies because they do not want to get the status of untouchables. Although in reality they are just like everyone else, only with the presence of the virus in the body. We're talking about the ones who get treated, not the ones who give up or carry the disease further, spreading it around. Did Norman come on to you again when he found out you'd broken up with Harry? Anna asked. No, I think it was just natural squeamishness. Like a father and son shouldn't share the same woman. It's a bit much. Yeah, I guess you're right. I don't know if I should talk, Selena said carefully. About what? Alice asked suspiciously. Are you sure you want to know? Yes, I'm not surprised about anything anymore. Now your father has a girlfriend on the side too. Wait, I'm not sure I want to hear that. Alice said fearfully and then thought for a moment and still asked, how do you know? I recently saw him at the mall with a woman in her 40s, and it's definitely not your mother. What's the big deal? Does your father often buy clothes for other women? Okasana asked sympathetically. Alice lowered her eyes. Was the truth really too cruel sometimes? Or had her father always been like that? I think that's enough for today, Alice said and got up from the table. She left the gazebo and walked to the pond. She sat down on the bank near the pond and looked at the water for a few minutes to calm herself. She had once loved this place very much. Several times they had come here with her brother and father to fish and swim. It was a little farther downstream, but the pond was the same. When Alice left, Selena put her card on the table. Here, you don't know it yet, but sometimes HIV medication is not enough for everyone. Sometimes they bring in drugs that cause too many side effects. If you need good meds, just give me a call. If you can't use the phone yourself, you can help others someday. Trust me, I've been in this system a long time. I know what I'm talking about. Aren't you ashamed of yourself? Anna asked. Why? For helping people. Do you know how much the tests cost? And this is just the beginning. And okay, you make good money, but there are people who already live below the poverty line. They can't afford a lot of things that you can easily afford. Are you some kind of Robin Hood? The girl asked unhappily. I already told you that I don't steal anything. The drugs that are sold on the black market are stolen before they even reach the hospitals. Some people make a business out of it. No one will ever get them because they wear such expensive suits that the average person has to work 5 years, if not more, for. Selena was not a stupid woman. Of course, it was hard to guess from Anna's appearance that she was pregnant if she didn't automatically press her hands to her stomach every now and then. Having been pregnant 3 times, Selena couldn't help but notice it. She didn't dare to ask right away, but when Alice left them, she did say, "What's the due date?" "What?" Anna was surprised. "I'm not stupid. It's not Harry's baby." "No." "What's the time frame?" 2 months. I hope the baby comes out healthy. It won't be easy, but try to do everything the doctors say. I think Harry did it because he started skipping his meds, or he's been drinking pacifiers. Pacifiers? Anna didn't understand. Yes, some dealers sell the drug cheaper, making up all sorts of fairy tales, but in fact they offer nothing that treats HIV. The more I listen to you, the scarier it gets, she confessed. Don't be afraid. People with HIV live a long time, and you're going to be a mom soon. Harry told me you always wanted children. Yes, I have, and for years I tried to get pregnant by a man who had a vasectomy. Anne replied sadly, "If you wanted to get pregnant, why didn't you go to the doctors to get checked out?" Selena asked gently. "Do you know many women of my age who run to the hospital if it doesn't work on the first try?" "Yes, I guess you're right." Alice walked into the gazebo, wiping the remnants of tears from her face. She looked sadly at both women and suggested, "Well, shall we go home?" Alice drove Selena home first, and then they drove on. Anna was silent for a long time, staring at the road, but then she couldn't stand it. She could see how sad Alice was. She didn't want any more confusion in her life. "Tell my mother I have the apartment by gift. Let her not waste money on courts and lawyers." "What?" My sister-in-law was surprised. Juliana called, said that she wants to get her share of the inheritance after Harry's death. "Are you serious? Would you think of something like that on purpose?" Anna snorted. "I'm going to talk to her tomorrow. Her mother's a grief-stricken mess." "Is she suffering?" "Yes, she cried for a month, almost never left the house. She's in a rage phase now, I guess since she's taking it out on you. I'm sorry about that." "Al, stop apologizing for something you didn't do." Alice was silent for a moment, then asked, "Do you blame me for not telling you?" "I used to, but then I thought of myself in your shoes. If my brother had told me he was clean, I would have believed him too. I guess that's how gullible we are. I really thought so." "I know." By the time they got to Anna's house, it was getting dark outside. The air was cooler, but it was more pleasant than not. "How about a glass of wine?" Alice suggested. "No, I don't drink anymore." Anna answered honestly. "Not at all. I almost drank myself to death when I found out about HIV. I don't want to anymore. Life has taught me something, and I don't advise you to drink alcohol. It usually ends badly." "Okay. Thanks for taking me to Selena's," Anna said as she got out of the car. "You're welcome. Don't say hi to your parents," jokingly said daughter-in-law and went to her driveway. Alice drove home. She barely survived the night, and in the early morning, she went to her parents to have a serious talk with them. At home, she found only her mother. Her father had already gone somewhere, though it was strange, since Sunday was a day off. No, I guess it wasn't strange, considering what she'd learned yesterday. "Is Dad coming soon?" "I don't know. He doesn't report to me." Julian replied grudgingly, rubbing her eyes. "Does he often run away from home like that?" "What makes you think he runs away?" Mom didn't understand. "He must have gone fishing again this morning." "Shit, it's that nuisance again." "What's wrong?" "I don't know. My eyes see and don't see. I don't know what to do." "Have you seen an eye doctor?" Yes, he said it's age. They're always like that. You're always fooling around. What do you want? It's age. I'm seeing worse and worse. Julian had been complaining a lot about her health lately. She had a sore throat or bronchitis or some other disease. Alice was silent for a while, gathering courage, and then said, I was talking to Anna the other day. Juliana turned sharply, almost dropped the mug with tea from her hands. Why are you hanging out with that trash? Mom, she's not trash. And she told me something. You're gonna sue her over the apartment. I don't want her to enjoy life after she killed my son. Are you serious? What does Anna have to do with this? Who do you think infected him? She did. She's the only one living and enjoying life, and my son is in a coffin. Mom, he infected her. Did she feed you such stories? Trust her more, or don't you trust my motherly instincts? Mom, it's not your gut, it's your anger. You need to blame someone, but Anna was a victim of her own circumstances. What are you trying to say? Then where did Harry get this disease? I was about to scream at my mother. Do you remember Selena? Alice asked, and Julian sat up in surprise. What? She's HIV positive. I didn't want to tell you, but I think it's the only way you'll stop hating Anna. Are you saying that she infected my son on purpose? Is that Selena? He knew about her diagnosis when he went to bed with her, from the first time. She told you that. No normal man would do something like that. No one who cares about life. And at that moment, Alice realized that she would have to tell the whole truth to make her mother believe her, but how hard it was to make this decision. And suddenly she realized something. If her father cheated on her from time to time, he could have brought some disease into the house too. Maybe Mom's vision and health problems had another hidden cause. And her head has been a mess lately, although it's too early to write her off as an old woman. Mom, please sit down. I have something to tell you. It won't be pleasant to hear, but you must know. If it's unpleasant, I don't want to hear it. What if it helps to fix the problem with your eyesight? I tried to interest her daughter. What would you know about that? Julian sat down at the table, though she had no desire to drink tea. Mom, Harry started dating Selena because of Dad. What? What's Norman got to do with it? Her mother snorted unhappily. Mom, have you ever noticed your father getting colder or staying late after work? What are you saying? He was never warm as a pie, but he was always a good husband, and all men linger after work, whether it's for a beer or a chat. Not all of them, Mom. Okay, I don't know how to make this any easier. Dad cheats on you sometimes, and he was in love with Selena. Harry started dating her to talk some sense into Dad. That's why he wanted to marry her. Are you listening to yourself? Julian hissed at her daughter. I understand you're angry. It's a perfectly normal reaction, but think about it. What else would make Harry do that? You said yourself that no normal person would think of it. Julian covered her eyes with her hands, trying to quiet the throbbing pain in her head that came after her daughter's words. She'd actually lied. She had suspected her husband of infidelity for years, but she had no concrete proof. And who cares? Yeah, sometimes men want fresh meat. Everybody does. Except Julian never thought their children would know about something like this. And now her daughter's words were hurting her heart. Okay, but what do my eyes have to do with it? Alice lowered her eyes shamefully, then looked at her mother. I may be wrong, but I saw in one show, as a man had hidden syphilis, he did not know about his disease for many years. He went to the doctors when the headaches started, and he almost went blind. Yes, Julian's headaches had been getting worse lately, but her daughter's words still seemed like outright nonsense. This is too much. Do you even hear what you're saying? It's not hard to check. All you have to do is take some tests. You don't have to do it if you want, but don't say I didn't warn you. The thought that her husband might have given her such a disease made Julian's head ache even more. She felt her blood pressure rising as if her brain was about to puddle. Give me a blood pressure pill, Mom asked. Do you want me to go to the hospital with you? Suggested her daughter. Alice was far from medicine, so she hoped that Mom was really sick with something else. She managed to persuade Julian to go to a private hospital and take some tests. She checked herself just in case. The results came back a few days later. No one expected this, but by some miracle her daughter was right. Julian's eyes widened with indignation when she saw the name of her disease. She never expected such a thing from her husband because she had no proof except her guesses. But this paper confirmed everything. Waiting for her husband from work, she shoved the results right in his face and made a showdown. "What the hell does that mean? What the hell does it mean?" she yelled at Norman. Looking into his dead eyes, she was once again convinced that it was all his fault. "But it can't be. I've been cured, and I didn't sleep with you then. This is not HIV. Syphilis can be contracted in the home. Couldn't you tell me? I would have washed the whole house, boiled all the dishes and bedding. Yeah, and you would have told me to go to hell. I know you. And if you do, why didn't you use your head? Have you no conscience at all? What if I was blind? What if I died? Do you know how long I'd have to be treated? I could have infected our children." Julian shouted when suddenly she realized, "And Egorek died because of you." When she heard her own voice, she sat down in surprise. She had been scolding Anna all this time, and it turned out that it was all her precious husband's fault. No, she could not forgive that. "Get out!" she screamed at the top of her voice. "Get out of this house. I don't want to see you again. Get out." Julian didn't even let her husband pack his things. She threw him out in what he wore when he came home from work. A couple days later, Alice came in, helped her mother unload her father's things into a traveling suitcase and took it to him. It turned out that Norman had already been taken in by his new girlfriend by then. Alice took a few more days off work to comfort her mother a little. It seemed that she was caught in some monstrous whirlpool of events, developing in the most incomprehensible directions. Shock, horror, longing. Emotions overwhelmed both women. Julian was shocked that after so many years of marriage, now she was alone and not needed by anyone. She hadn't expected it to end like this. "Mom, don't you want to call Anna and apologize?" her daughter once asked her. "God will forgive," the mother just answered. Anna was very worried about her pregnancy, HIV, plus months of drinking before conception, not to mention how she got pregnant. She could only hope that by some miracle the baby would be born healthy. She followed all the doctor's appointments, complied with all their recommendations. Everything seemed to be going well, but when she was 8 months pregnant, something happened that she did not expect at all. When she went to another appointment with an infectious disease specialist, it turned out that the medications she was prescribed were out of stock, and she could not interrupt the course. "Well, what can I do? We're waiting for another shipment. This isn't Washington. This happens all the time." "Did you have a stash?" the doctor asked dejectedly. "What stash? You told me yourself that there would be medicine." "You are just new. My patients are already used to the fact that sometimes there are such interruptions. What am I supposed to do? Wait, there should be a shipment in a couple of days. And if they don't? It will, you have to believe." Anna, like many others, had never been treated for HIV before, so she did not realize that these people live in fear, and they are afraid not only to die, but also to go untreated. After talking to one woman who was sitting under the office after the appointment, she learned that this happens quite often, about twice a year. You can buy medicines, but they cost a lot, and they are not always available. How do you cope? Anna asked her new acquaintance with horror. "Sometimes I ask to be given pills with a reserve, but it does not always work." So that's what the doctor was talking about. Yeah, that's what a lot of people do. You want to live, but the state has to provide. Really? You think that's the only thing they're supposed to do, but they don't. But yes, it's very depressing. Anna was driving home, trying to figure out what to do, when suddenly she remembered Selena's card. She found it, even though I had to go through several purses, and then called her right away. Telling her what had happened, she hoped she could help. "Text me the medications and dosages. I'll find out," replied Harry's ex. "Thank you. I'll send a message now." "Do you have anything right now?" "Yeah, for a couple days at the most." "Why didn't you go to the doctor beforehand?" "You're pregnant. They would have given you one." "I got caught up. I had things to do. I didn't know this could happen." "Keep it in mind for the future. We need to stock up." "Okay, wait. I'll call you when I know something." Anna was in shock. She didn't know what to do if even Selena couldn't help, but the phone rang in the evening. "Come tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock. I'll be waiting for you." "Did you find it?" "Yes, But take the money. It's not free. In the morning, Anna called a cab and went to her place. Selena had given her a supply of pills, but she had to pay a lot for them. In any case, it was better than nothing, because otherwise the baby could be born with HIV, and this should not be allowed. Anna thanked her for the medicine and then suddenly said, "I'm sorry for what I said to you last time. Now I understand more about why you're doing this. Some people really need help. Just don't give out my contacts. It's a China business. I don't want to go to jail for a few years for that help." "I understand." A week later, the doctor called and said the drugs had arrived. Anna went to the hospital and replenished the supplies, but in her heart, she was glad that now she had at least a small insurance, a stash for a rainy day. And while Anna was happy for herself, she realized that there were probably people who weren't as lucky as she was. They could go without treatment for a week or more, and that's not safe for their health. The thought that the medication could be gone for a month or more made her even more scared. She could only hope that it would never happen. The time for delivery was approaching. The closer the day got, the more the tension inside grew. Negative. Anna read the test results of her newborn daughter. She knew, of course, that it was not yet an indicator, but it was at least the first step. The first analysis was done when the baby was first born. Anna gave birth to a baby girl and named her Vera. She was very hopeful that thanks to the therapy, she had not transmitted her misfortune to her daughter, but she could not be sure of it yet. Anna had a cesarean section on the due date. When she saw her daughter for the first time in her life, she realized that she would love her whether she was born sick or not. But to her surprise, Veronica did not have any abnormalities, except that she was born very small, only 2.5 kilograms, but this is not an indicator. And Anna also had a great desire to live longer because she wanted to see all the significant moments in the life of her daughter. She wanted to hear her first word and see her first steps, to take her to the first grade, and then walk on her graduation. She dreamed of getting her daughter married and babysitting her grandchildren. She did not know how real it was, but the doctors convinced her that everything would happen if she did not stop treatment. When Veronica turned 1 year old, she had another HIV test, which was negative again. Anna rejoiced like a child, hoping that the next one would be the same. Once at the next appointment with an infectious disease specialist, she was again left without medication. There was a small stash at home, but in any case, this situation every time inspired silent horror. She came out with such a distressed face that the young man sitting under the office immediately guessed what was wrong and asked, "No medicine again?" She only shook her head, watching his eyes darken. "How many can you do?" he asked. "I'm shocked. I have 3 days left. And you?" "A little more." "Did they say when it would be?" Anna shook her head again, then sighed heavily and answered, "They promised me no more than a week." "Shit, I won't last that long." She thought for a moment and then offered, "Would you like some coffee?" The young man even smiled. He thought he had taken a liking to the pretty brunette. This had not happened to him very often lately. In the cafe they got to talking. Anna found out that he got infected when he had a blood transfusion. The guy's not a drug addict or a streetwalker. Stuart, that's his name, suspected something was wrong when he started losing weight for no reason. He went to the hospital, took tests, and hello. Thankfully, he was not dating anyone at the time, did not have time to reward anyone with his disease, and as soon as he found out, he stopped thinking about women altogether. He did not want to hide, but as soon as he mentioned HIV, everyone ran away from him as if there was a fire. It's understandable though. Pluses, that's what people with HIV called each other. A lot of people were afraid to get involved with the minuses. They didn't want other people to get hurt because of them. Are you married? Not anymore. Divorced? Dead. Plus? Yes. And you're because of him? Yes. It's sad. Terrible, but we'll live, she said hopefully. Do they know at work? No. That's right. And your family? They're supportive. I'm lucky. They've all given up on me like I'm a leper. Even my parents don't talk to me. I'm sorry. Yes, you are. I have a daughter, Anna said with a smile. Stuart looked at her in surprise and smiled too. Plus, minus for now, but there will be more tests. That's great. How old is she? She's a year old, just over a year old. Where is she now? At home with my friend. You're a lucky girl, he said, not without a little envy. Anna thought for a moment and then decided, I know where to get some medicine. Are you serious? Yes, but it's a big secret. Of course it is. Will you help? I've got money. Write down what you need and your phone number. I'll find out. I'll find out. Okay. Stuart was so excited. A week of waiting was a furor. He simply wouldn't have enough pills if the situation didn't change. After taking his note, Anna went home, and from there she called Selena. The next morning she contacted the steward and told him that he could come to her for his medication in the afternoon. He arrived at about 7 in the evening, just after work. She handed him the package and took the money. As Stuart was about to leave, little Veronica suddenly came crawling into the hallway. She couldn't stomp very well, but she could crawl with incredible speed, and she had also learned to climb down from the couch, where her mother had left her with cushions. Wow, what a cutie, said Stuart when he saw the baby. What's her name? Veronica. That's a good name. Hi, Veronica. He turned to the girl and squatted down. Anna gave her a hand and her daughter stood on her feet, came closer and grabbed his knee. Anna, can I? He asked with a smile, and she nodded. Stuart grabbed the little girl in his arms and tossed her up slightly, and the girl laughed. Strong male arms, who wouldn't like that? Veronica liked men very much, but she'd only ever talked to her brother and Anna's father, and she obviously liked the black-browed Stuart because she was smiling at him with her almost toothless mouth. How lucky you are, he said, looking at little Veronica. Yes, she's my miracle. From that day on, Anna and Stuart became friends. For the first time, they sometimes walked together with Norman in the park or just around the city. Their relationship grew warmer every day. After 3 months, Stuart asked Anna out on a real date for the first time. They knew that dating minuses is unlikely to work out, but experiencing it all together is still better than nothing. After a few more months, Stuart offered Anna to live together. So and settled in one apartment, 2 lovers plus, and one small, but very cute minus. When in a year and a half the girl's tests again showed a negative result, the doctor calmly exhaled. The hardest part is behind us. From Alice, Anna learned about the fact that her former mother-in-law for several weeks treated for the disease, which awarded her hubby. The girls did not stop communicating after Harry's death, even became friends. Having learned about the pregnancy, Alice was very happy, and when the baby was born, volunteered to be her godmother. Anna did not refuse. I'll let it be good if the daughter will have another spare mom just in case. We cannot say that the future life of Anna and Stuart will be absolutely happy and beautiful, because there are still a lot of difficulties and surprises ahead, but still two survive easier than alone. And it's easier to raise a daughter when there are both parents, and Stuart volunteered to adopt Veronica right after they got married.
People often meet unexpectedly, but these meetings influence future events and sometimes turn the whole life around. Something like this happened to Elizabeth. Elizabeth and her sister Leslie, who was 2 years older than her, lived with their grandmother. The grandmother was not that old, still working, and was the guardian of the girls, who had been orphaned by a tragic accident. The family lived in the suburbs. The girls' father worked as a tractor driver, their mother as a cook at the school. One day in the fall, the father was loading hay and left some in the loader to bring to lunchtime for his animals. The weather was lovely that day. The sun was shining gently. The breeze was touching the body tenderly, and it was so calm and pleasant on the soul that John, the girl's father, felt such happiness, such joy in life that he wanted to sing. His life turned out well. After the army, he met Maidie, and she seemed so desirable to him that he could not imagine life without her. Her fluffy hair, affectionate look, malleability fell into his soul from the first meeting. Soon they got married. When John drove into the yard, Maddie was tending to a calf. John suddenly wanted to play a joke on Maddie, so he decided to pile the fragrant hay right at Maddie's feet. But at that moment something happened to the hoist, and it crashed down on the poor woman and the calf. Maddie didn't even have time to cry out. The impact was on her head. John, white as a wall, got off the tractor in a flash. When he saw the terrible picture, he howled like a wounded animal. Clutching his head and biting his bloody lips, John was mad with grief. His eyes rested on the rope with which the calf was tied. The solution came instantly. The only thought drilling into his brain was, what have I done? How can I live without her? I can't. The neighbor, hearing some incomprehensible sounds, John's heartbreaking scream, rushed to the neighbor's yard. But it was too late. What she saw so shocked her that she almost fainted. That day the girls were orphaned. Leslie was 6 years old and Elizabeth was 4. 12 years had passed. Leslie, an 18-year-old girl, is in culinary school. Very attractive, tall, with dark hair and big brown eyes. She resembles her father. Elizabeth is 16 years old, graduating from high school. A calm, balanced girl. She studies well and dreams of entering the University of Chemical Technology. Elizabeth, like her mother, with blue eyes, fluffy hair, short, with surprisingly beautiful proportions of the body. Both brought up in strictness, for which we must give credit to their grandmother Aubrey, who devoted the rest of her life to these girls. She was widowed early and had a hard time. The money she earned and received for the children was often not enough. She had to live modestly on a shoestring. Elizabeth was rarely bought new things, mostly left from her older sister, but she did not hold a grudge. The girl often dreamed that she would finish school, will work, buy herself everything and even be able to surprise her grandmother and sister with gifts. Leslie has already been taking care of guys. Elizabeth sometimes saw how happy Leslie was after a date. She herself would be 17 soon, and none of the boys would even come near her. She began to look in the mirror more often and was always dissatisfied with her appearance. It seemed to her that she had a long nose, inexpressive eyes, and for some reason very fluffy eyelashes, and lips in general small and chubby, like a child. Classmates have already met with guys and often met at recess. Elizabeth saw this and felt somehow insecure. She did not understand how you can share with friends personal experiences. The girl read a lot. It should be said that the books of that time, as well as programs on television, were subjected to a fairly strict censorship. In the masses came out literature, which was supposed to bring up a highly spiritual, morally stable citizen. Fiction publications spoke more about the beautiful side of love, duty, respect. Elizabeth was brought up on this. This is how she imagined her future love, and knew that between a man and a woman there should be a bright feeling that will bind them for life. But it hadn't happened to her yet, and she waited with hope for the meeting, which, it seemed to her, should be happy, special, and for life. The spring of 1970 came. Prepared for the holiday on March 8. In the school where Leslie studied were to come to the conscript soldiers with amateur art, congratulate the girls on International Women's Day. Leslie and her friend with excitement going to this event. They put on their best dresses, giggled, and tweaked their bangs. Leslie applied snowflake foundation to her face and became even more attractive. Elizabeth watched them and was a little envious. Angelica, Leslie's girlfriend, seeing Elizabeth, suddenly suggested, "Let's take Elizabeth with us. Will you come with us, Elizabeth? Can we?" Leslie said she had to ask her grandmother, but grandmother was not at home, and the girls decided to take Elizabeth with them without asking. She was quickly dressed, painted her face, lips, and went to the school. In the foyer there were already a lot of people. Soldiers in neutered uniforms with white collars, polished buttons, cut and shaved, seemed to be an example of decency and imitation. Music was blaring. Dressed-up girls, giggling, stood aside. Soon the hosts opened the evening. The soldiers sang in chorus, recited poems, played guitar and accordion. Elizabeth liked the guy who sang a song about his mother. He was of medium height, very handsome, and had an excellent voice. And the song was so heartfelt. Everyone clapped for a long time and asked him to sing an encore. Then the guys played wind instruments and started dancing to live music. It was so beautiful and solemn. Elizabeth watched her sister twirling with the tall guy, Angelica laughing with the surgeon. She had already decided that it was time for her to leave, that no one would invite her. She felt sad and bored at this party. Suddenly someone in a warm voice said to her, "May I invite you?" Elizabeth stood there with her eyes wide open in disbelief. In front of her was the same guy who sang about Mom. Slightly embarrassed, she said yes, and then she first felt the man's hand on her waist. Inside everything was somehow squeezed. It was scary and pleasant to feel the warmth of a strong hand. Elizabeth danced easily. She felt the music. Her soul sang. And the guy looked at her directly, and she was embarrassed by this look. If she had not been so innocent, she would have realized that the look was insolent. That evening, Elizabeth danced only with him. He pulled her tighter and tighter against him, and she thought that was the way it was, embarrassed to say she was uncomfortable. At the end of the evening, they met. Jack, he said and shook her hand firmly. Elizabeth, she replied. He asked for her address. She gave it. And so she received her first letter, in which Jack explained his feelings, asked for a date when he went on furlough. Elizabeth read the letter, and her heart beat harder. It was so exciting, anxious and joyful at the same time. The girl gave her consent. Elizabeth was overwhelmed by feelings. And look, it affected her grades. One day in chemistry class, the teacher noticed. Elizaveta, if you have not changed your mind to enter chemical engineering, you need to pull up. And Elizabeth was busy dreaming about Jack. He wrote often, and every time it seemed to her that everything was he. She had met her great love for life. In class, she was often seen smiling distractedly. At home, too, Elizabeth's moods were noticed. Grandma got worried, but Leslie calmed her down. The guy will soon serve. To demobile 4 months left, and we'll go home. It's a piece of cake. And Sully came on a date. It is impossible to convey in words what Elizabeth felt after the first kiss. It was so sweet and so eager to do it again that she let Jack kiss her hands, her lips, her neck. Sometimes she shook with a small tremor, a state that the boy liked very much. Will you marry me? I have to go to school, was the answer. But it's such a long wait, and my demob is soon. Let's go to my place. We'll have a wedding, and you'll study by correspondence. I'll have to think about it, said Elizaveta. Please think about it, Jack asked. Elizabeth never thought about the final outcome of the meetings. In the evening, reading Jack's next letter of confession, she didn't know what she should do. She understood that it was too early to marry, that she had to study, but remembering their meetings, the feelings she had experienced, she was afraid that Jack would go away, leave her and marry someone else, and no one would ever look at her again, that no one would want her. She remembered how he sang a song about her mother, whom, of course, he loved very much. Elizabeth did not know motherly love, did not have time to feel it. Grandmother was always in business, strict in upbringing, loved the girls in her own way. She was like a dictator in the family. Everyone obeyed her will. I am an adult, so Elizabeth thought, and I could do whatever I want, not my grandmother. At the next meeting with Jack, Elizabeth was thoughtful and silent. I'm 3 weeks away from Dima, he said. Make up your mind. I'm waiting for your consent. I don't know, Elizabeth said, because somehow you get married and then you get married. You know very well that it is impossible. Yes, Elizabeth knew that Jack lived in a village somewhere in Alaska, that he had 3 brothers and 2 older sisters. When he finished the 8th grade, he went to school as a mechanic, but did not graduate because he had a fight with the teacher. Then for 2 years he lived at a log cabin in the forest with his grandfather and was drafted into the army in a construction battalion. Elizabeth in his youth and naivety did not give it all meaning and saw only light in his biography. In fact, Jack did not really wait for Elizabeth's consent. He easily got acquainted with girls, but seeing the softness of Elizabeth, decided that with such a wife will be easy to live. She is young, does not know people well, life and wealth has not seen, and besides loves him, and therefore will forgive a lot. And Jack also wanted to prove to Leslie her name was exactly the same as Elizabeth's sister's, which made it even more unpleasant, his ex-girlfriend, who had not waited for him and married someone else, how good he was. He had found such a young one, such a beauty. Let Leslie curl up with anger and envy. Jack's family really lived in a village 200 kilometers from the district center. The village was located in the forest. To get to it in the fall and spring on the off-road was almost impossible. The inhabitants mainly lived by fishing for pine nuts, kept livestock. Jack's family led a dissolute life. Father, mother, and their close relatives liked to go on a bender for 56 days. The children were practically neglected. The older sisters had married several times, which was not common in those years, and both had 2 children from different marriages. They all lived together in one hut. One of the brothers was serving in the army for the first year. The other 2 were hanging around the village, doing nothing, and could have a good drink on any good occasion. Quarrels and fights were common in the family. Everyone talked without hesitation. This was the atmosphere to which Jack had decided to bring Elizabeth, who had no idea of such a life. Time passed and the demobilization drew near. Jack had written only 3 letters home during his service and received one. He was not allowed to go on leave because of his misconduct and bad service. A fellow soldier, knowing Jack's attitude, wanted to tell Elizabeth about her lover, his behavior in the army, and everything he knew about the family. But the circumstances were such that he could not meet Elizabeth. Meanwhile, Elizabeth successfully passed her exams, received her certificate, and decided to enroll. And with Jack wanted to agree not to hurry with the wedding. Elizabeth rode in the train, having handed in the documents for admission to the university. The mood was just fine. Someone sat down next to her. She turned around and saw Jack. What a coincidence. Her soul just sang. He took her in his arms and kissed her with feeling. The neighbors murmured disapprovingly. In those years such behavior was condemned. Young people had to restrain their feelings. Elizabeth became uncomfortable. Feeling awkward, she asked in a whisper, "Why did you do it?" "I have already served," he announced cheerfully. "Tonight is our train. We go together. I decided so. I love you and I can't be without you." "But She had no time to say anything before he covered her mouth with a sweet kiss. "I don't want to know anything. Or don't you love me?" "I do," she whispered softly. "I have to tell my grandmother and sister, and I have entrance exams in a month and a half." "You're an adult with your own life, and you can study by correspondence. Let's get off at La Connor, and then we'll go to yours and explain everything." They rode to La Connor with their arms around each other, no longer embarrassed by the other passengers. In La Connor, they went to a cafe at the station, both of them hungry. The waitress was looking at Elizabeth carefully. Once again, approaching the table, she asked Jack, "What about Sylvester?" "It's all gone," Jack replied. "And Sylvester is who?" "Sylvesterto." "Yes, it's a friend in the service," Elizabeth heard back. The waitress shook her head and did not approach again. "I have to go out for a while. Wait for me, okay?" Jack asked and kissed Elizabeth. When he returned, Elizabeth saw a glint in his eyes and a satisfied smile. "Have you been drinking? Why?" "I'm happy. I've done my service. And you're there for me? What's the occasion?" "Come on, I'll introduce you to someone." They went out, and after a block they came to a ground-floor apartment in a 5-story building. Jack had the key to the apartment. Explaining that a friend had left the key, he opened the door. The room was uncomfortable, with a musty odor. Jack offered to come in, but said he would put the kettle on and lock the door. Elizabeth was wary. Something told her to run away, that this was no place for you. Jack came out in a t-shirt, put his arms around Elizabeth and drew her to the sofa, kissing her and saying affectionate words. Elizabeth knew almost nothing about this side of love. They didn't talk about such things at home. And at school, the girls never went further than kissing. Suspecting nothing, Elizabeth was calm. But suddenly he threw her on the couch, and the airy skirt of the dress was not a big obstacle. Elizabeth felt a sudden pain. She felt sick, realized what had happened, and cried to her heart's content. In the kitchen, the kettle hissed. Jack lay contentedly sprawled on the sofa. Elizabeth shrank into a ball and looked at the mirror hanging over the sofa, noting the swollen face from tears and the darkened patches of skin on his neck and lips from kisses. It was creepy and disgusting to see herself like this, and how she would tell her grandmother and sister about it. She dreaded to think. Jack looked at his watch and fidgeted. It was 7 hours before the train arrived. "Get up and get cleaned up," he commanded. "Hurry to yours, get your clothes and money. Let's go." Elizabeth imagined what eyes her grandmother would look at her if she found out, how her sister would react. She was scared, wanted to scream, to hide from everyone and not go anywhere. She was afraid to go with Jack, but she was afraid to go home too. What to do? Upon reaching home, Elizabeth left Jack around the corner, sneaking into the house from the back door herself. Her sister and grandmother were in the vegetable garden. She quickly gathered some things from her clothes and shoes, and taking almost all the money from her grandmother's cash register, took one last look at her bed and decided to leave the house. She found a piece of paper and quickly wrote in pencil, "Gone with Jack. Address later, money back. Elizabeth." And so they went for the second day, 4 more to the end of the road, and then by bus 200 kilometers. Jack hid the money in his breast pocket. It was safer, and it was easier for him to buy food. After drinking a lot, he slept on the top shelf. Houses, towns, villages, forests, and meadows flashed by. It was very beautiful outside the window. Although Elizaveta never went far from home, she did not notice all this. Her mood was depressed, especially after another molestation by Jack in the restroom. "What am I doing? Why am I allowing this? But I can't have a scandal right in the train car. It's embarrassing." She wanted to get off at any station, to run away somewhere, so that no one saw her. No one knew anything. She did not imagine the beginning of family life in such a way. She thought it would be beautiful, solemn. With all her being, she realized that it was not what she had expected, but some force and fear did not let her go from this ruinous path. The woman sitting in the compartment sometimes looked sympathetically at Elizabeth, shook her head without saying anything. Finally, they reached the desired station. They got out of the carriage and walked to the bus station. The bus was in 3 hours. Only now Elizabeth noticed the fabulous nature of this region. Tall cedars with dark green paws, hanging down, clung to each other, swaying slightly in the breeze. It was summer. The intoxicating smell of pine needles penetrated her lungs. It was easy to breathe, and Elizaveta's mood lifted. She imagined a taiga village, wonderful nature, clean air. It suddenly struck her. Do your parents know that we are going? No way. Let it be a surprise, Jack laughed. The month of June was coming to an end. On August 1, the entrance exams to the university began. Nothing, thought Elizaveta. I'll get acquainted with his parents, and in 2 weeks, I'll go to the correspondence department. Jack went somewhere, then came back with 2 guys. It turned out fellow villagers. All 3 of them were drunk. They decided to celebrate. Jack pointed proudly at Elizabeth. That's mine. One of the guys said. What about Leslie? She was waiting for you, but she's already with child, with a soldier to be. And all 3 of them laughed. Elizabeth felt uncomfortable. God, where have I gotten myself into? She thought. In spite of everything, she still loved Jack, and she wanted to be with him. But as they approached Jack's house and she saw his family, she realized that she had really gotten herself into some kind of den. The house was not very old, but it was neglected, and there was wormwood growing in the garden. 4 dogs greeted them with frantic barking. Then came a woman with braided uncombed hair, wearing a dirty dress and smelling of booze. It appeared to be his mother. Elizabeth remembered Jack thinking about his mom, and she felt uneasy. Both sisters were also tipsy and unkempt. Who did you bring, son? His father asked, barely able to stand. My wife, Jack answered. Everyone stood and stared in amazement at Elizabeth, a clean, pretty girl with intelligent eyes. The older sister, slanting her eyes at Elizabeth's blouse, asked, And why the hell did you bring her here? We have nothing to eat ourselves, and stumbling, went along the wall. Elizabeth was horrified and wanted to go back immediately. Jack put his arm around her shoulders. Don't, Elizabeth, don't be afraid. They're good, just a little drunk. They entered the house. The place was a mess. 2 little girls about 45 years old slept in a corner, on a sweatshirt, with a big Siberian cat nestled next to them. There were no doormats. The floorboards were unpainted and dirty. Elizabeth shrank back, not knowing what to do. Then the owner of the house, the mother, came in. Joyful, with tears in her eyes, she began to embrace her son and Elizabeth. Son, you have money? We should celebrate your return. It's not every day we meet our son. And you've brought your wife, a pretty girl, too. We should invite the family, or they'll be offended. We often go out with them, the mother said and looked at her son questioningly. Jack hesitated a little, then, agreeing with his mother, took out of his pocket the money left over from Elizabeth's grandmother's expenses and gave it to his mother. Taking the distraught Elizabeth aside, kissing and holding her close, looking into her eyes with boundless devotion, he said, Elizabeth, let us celebrate our meeting, our wedding. I with you, and you with me. We don't need anything else. We love each other so much. I'll earn money and send it to your grandmother after a month and a half. Valor, I wanted to go to a correspondence school. You'll have time, Elizabeth. We can do it next year. Elizaveta went back to her things and counted the money left in her purse. There were 2 rubles and 36 kopecks. That was all she had left. What happened then, she did not want to remember. Jack's family had gathered. They all liked to drink, bought cases of vodka, snacks, and started a grand drinking party. First, they drank for the arrival, then they shouted bitter. Jack got so drunk that he forgot about his young wife, and Elizabeth slipped into the yard behind the barn and cried bitterly. She clearly realized that nowhere cannot go. She has no money, and to ask her grandmother does not allow conscience. She was tormented by the thought of how in which she would repay the debt and what to write to her relatives about her stupidity. 2 months passed. At first, Elizabeth tried to put the house in order, but she did not see any results. Jack and Elizabeth were given a small room with a bed, a table, and a corner of the stove. The bed could not be called a bed. The food was potatoes and milk, and it was good that there were 2 cows, which Elizabeth learned to milk, and it became her duty. Relations with her sisters did not work out. Elizabeth felt like a stranger who had accidentally entered the house. The sisters, unashamedly scandalizing each other, began to put on things without asking her about it. "Why you need them? You're so young, and you've already snatched up our Jack. We have to make our own destiny. We have to be liked by men. And you're not for strangers to look at." They were often gone for 2 or 4 days at a time. The kids were crying, looking for their moms. Jack's mother was a wastrel woman. She was about 48 years old and looked 65. Toothless, with stinking breath, she was constantly swearing and was dissatisfied with everyone and everything. Although, looking at her closely, especially after the bath, one could see traces of her former beauty, and the children could boast of her appearance. Jack's father was calm. It didn't take much intelligence to realize that he had once been mired in this swamp. One day, sitting alone and looking at Elizabeth, he said, "I am sorry for you, girl. I loved my wife so much when she was young. She was so beautiful. But there was nothing I could do. She had all her relatives born and raised in a drunken frenzy. In the end, I became part of that swamp myself. I couldn't bring up my children with dignity either." Elizabeth did not catch the secret meaning of Jack's father's words. Soon their family was visited by the district police officer about the fact that neither Elizabeth nor Jack had registered, not working anywhere. Yes, there used to be an article for idleness, and Jack, after mobilization, never came to the military enlistment office. "And these are guests," the mother brazenly lied to the policeman, pointing at her grandchildren. The family found money for only 1 ticket for Jack, and he went to the district to solve problems. There was no work in the village. Elizaveta, not having a specialty, was temporarily hired at a neighboring state farm as a calf breeder. Jack got a job as a mechanic. Every day Elizabeth rode her bicycle to work. There was an opportunity to send her grandmother a debt. For Elizabeth, $100 was an unaffordable sum. She received a little $50 a month. Writing a letter to her relatives, she promised to send the debt, wrote that she was doing well, that she was happy, but did not give a return address. At work, her partner was Aunt Olivia, who treated her very warmly, almost like a daughter. Seeing how thin Elizabeth was, Olivia fed her buns and cakes. Soon Elizabeth realized she was pregnant. Olivia, noticing that the girl had become pale and often vomited, asked, "Are you expecting a baby?" "I don't know," Elizabeth replied. "Well, go to the midwife." At home, she shared with Jack. She thought he would be happy, but he was not happy and asked her to have an abortion. "The first abortion is undesirable and you're a long way off. So girl, you're gonna be the mom. The next appointment is in 2 weeks. The midwife made a card, wished Elizabeth well, and told her to eat better. Elizabeth and Jack did not register their marriage. She was not yet 18 years old. Another month passed. Elizabeth began to suffer from severe toxicosis. She became weak and her food was poor. She no longer dreamed of study. Sometimes it seemed to her that she would soon die without seeing her family and the baby. Sister Barbara urged Jack to get rid of the child. "This baby will tie your hands. She's from Washington. She won't live with you long. You'll be paying child support till you're 18, you fool. Think about what's in store for you. Your Leslie's getting a 2nd year of child support and living on it. And you're gonna pay for it, you dumbass. Don't you dare register with her." On the one hand, Jack was used to Elizabeth. He liked her, and he even listened to her in some ways. But she's his own sister, his blood. She wouldn't give him bad advice. Besides, Barbara is older, knows life better, and she herself also received alimony. He also saw that young men at the state farm were looking at Elizaveta, and it made him angry. And Elizaveta, in turn, asked him to write an application for an apartment and move to the state farm. She already liked working with cows. True, the team was not very good, except for Aunt Olivia. The women liked to drink, celebrate everything, wash everything, and often swore with the mat. Elizaveta wanted to get out of her husband's family and live separately, have a child, and be a mistress. She managed to send her grandmother 30 rubles, and she was pleased with herself. "I'll get paternity pay and send all the money," she thought. New Year was approaching. Everyone was preparing for the meeting. There were queues in the stores. Everyone wanted to buy presents and groceries. Elizaveta did not see any money from Jack. He often drank his paycheck with friends or relatives or gave it to his mother, a holy thing. Elizabeth wanted to have a good holiday. Prepare a table, like at grandma's, buy small gifts. She was happy in her own way. The belly is already rounded. At the reception, the midwife said that soon expected to move, that it is time to wear spacious clothes, which of course she did not have, and buy was not on what. Still, by New Year's Eve, she had raised some funds. She bought Jack some razors, her children some toothbrushes, her sisters some pantyhose, her mother a handkerchief, and her father some socks and a handkerchief. She walked on, pleased with herself. Though the gifts were insignificant, she hoped they would be welcome. Leslie congratulated her grandmother with a card too. Elizabeth felt so good. She walked leisurely. You can't ride a bicycle in winter, and the carriage left when she was at the store. 7 kilometers on foot was not so long. There were coniferous trees covered with snow all around. It was very beautiful. The frosty air slightly tingled my cheeks. It was so easy to breathe that she walked the distance to the village without feeling tired. The house was tense. Jack wasn't home. There were potatoes in a cast iron, black bread on the table, and a cold kettle beside it. The oven was also cold. New Year's Eve was not even smelled. Elizaveta became heavy and resentful. She went into her room and lay down, feeling weak and dizzy. She wanted to sleep. In the kitchen, the sisters-in-law were bickering. Both of them did not have regular jobs, citing that there was no one to leave the children with. Occasionally, they worked part-time. Elizabeth fell into a light sleep. She was awakened by a rumble, something falling. The sisters were discussing family life. She heard that Jack has been seeing Leslie for 2 months now, and she doesn't know, and that he would be spending New Year's Eve with his old girlfriend. Elizabeth was numbed by the news, choked up, wanting to scream with resentment so painful that she could not find the words to describe it. Beyond such betrayal, the name Leslie, the name her sister bears. Then her mother came in and asked her rudely, "What have you brought in your bag?" Elizabeth stood up, took the bag and handed over the gifts. The new relatives did not expect such a turn, stood in a daze, and to some extent even rejoiced. But then the elder sister Barbara, cursing folly, said, "You've sent your remittances of $30, and you feed us with handouts. You're a good little snob. Jack won't marry you. You're not 18 years old yet, so your degenerate will not get alimony. Do not wait." Elizabeth cried bitterly and went to her room without saying anything in reply. She had long ago guessed that the sisters were going through her bag, and that she had sent the money they found out at the post office from a friend. She no longer wanted New Year's Eve or the baby she was carrying. God, what am I gonna do? How am I gonna get out of here? God help me. In the other room there was laughter and some kind of commotion. They decided to celebrate New Year's Eve, Elizabeth thought. She calmed down, only tears rolled from her eyes without stopping. She spent New Year's Eve on her bed in her den. Jack wasn't home. When the noise died down, Elizabeth got up, dressed, and went out into the yard. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning. There was noise in the village and lights were burning. Not knowing why, Elizabeth walked up to the house. The windows were not curtained. Elizabeth saw a group of young people celebrating a holiday. Jack was not with them. She breathed a sigh of relief and turned and wanted to walk back. "You creep, you're watching," she heard. Jack was standing in front of her. He had been drinking heavily and had gone out for a smoke. Furious, he ran up to her, grabbed her arm and pushed her so hard that she fell on her back. "I loved Nastia for a long time, and you yourself imposed on me," he shouted angrily and desperately kicked her in the stomach. Elizabeth felt sick. She felt dizzy, nauseous, and her ears were ringing. She lay on the snow, unable to get up. Jack spat to the side and walked toward the house. The only thing she heard was, "You, Valeraka, calm down." "I love you, sweetheart," Leslie said affectionately. She woke up when she felt someone dragging her through the snow. "You've got to be so drunk. She might freeze to death," some man said, dragging her toward Jack's house. The door was open. The man dragged Elizabeth into the hallway and left. She struggled to get to her room. It was very hard to breathe. Her lower back and stomach ached. Alex, one of Jack's brothers, came back in the morning and, seeing Elizabeth sleeping alone, decided to have some fun with her while his older brother was away. Elizabeth was his age and liked him. He often saw his brother treat her roughly and felt sorry for her. He wanted to be with her, so he ventured out. But when he put his hand under her skirt, felt something sticky and saw blood, he realized that something was wrong with the girl. Alex got dressed and quickly ran to the doctor, who fortunately was at home. Elizaveta was taken in the director's car to the district hospital. She lost a lot of blood and was often unconscious. She went into premature labor. The baby girl who was born was dead. Jack found out about it 3 days later. Both he and his relatives were afraid that Elizabeth would tell the police station the reason for her condition, although everyone in the village knew that Jack had beaten his wife. Leslie threw him out. "Go and find an alibi for yourself. I don't want to go through with this case. I have a child." Elizabeth recovered very slowly. Weakened body and constant malnutrition affected the girl's condition. People from the state farm came to visit her. Many people donated blood. The relatives from her husband's side did not come, and Jack himself was only twice. When he saw her weakened and thin, her face graying, he decided, why would he need such a wife? And it was unlikely that she would be able to give birth again. But when Jack was summoned to the investigation department and explained what he would face in case Elizabeth filed a report on his behavior, the mood of the family changed dramatically. Jack's sisters and parents visited her. They were courteous, brought groceries, sympathized, and her mother even cried. Alex suffered the most. He was being drafted into the army in the spring. Alex decided that if Jack throws Elizabeth out, he will find her and will definitely marry. Elizabeth even seemed that everyone loved her and that she was previously unfair to her husband's kin. Jack's feelings also sharpened. He began to come more often, long sat with Elizabeth, kissed her hands, tenderly embraced. Elizabeth perked up. The process of recovery went faster. A healthy blush appeared, a sparkle in her eyes. Alex also came a few times, but he came alone, without his family. Elizabeth knew that if it weren't for him, she would probably have died, and she was grateful to him. But he always stood there and was silent, only looking at her with all his eyes and thinking about something of his own. Elizaveta had no idea of his feelings. Elizaveta was discharged at the end of February. She did not go to court because she thought it was wrong to report her husband and make a mess of things. She wrote to her grandmother and Leslie that she was doing well, that she was working, and that she and Jack wanted to visit them in the summer. But as it turned out, spring came. The roads were so muddy you couldn't get through. The mail hadn't come for a month. The grocery store hadn't come either. Jack's family started fighting and drinking again. Alex had been in the army, and they'd been drinking for a week. Jack quit his job and spent nights at Leslie's. Elizabeth was temporarily out of work because of the road. She washed, cleaned, cooked at home. One night in front of everyone, Jack said he wasn't going to get married anytime soon. "I don't want a family. I don't want to live in bondage. I've had enough women to last me a lifetime." "What about me?" Elizabeth was confused. "Why did you follow him? Did you think you would have found a simpleton and wanted to settle down?" Barbara shouted, "You should have gotten out of here a long time ago. You wanted to have a baby and live off child support." Elizabeth left the table, a lump in her throat. "Give me the money for the ticket. I'll leave right away." Here we go. "And when you came here, who gave you the money?" "What a hottie. Look for someone dumber than us." The next day, Elizaveta wanted to borrow money from the neighbors, but all the neighbors knew Jack's family, and no one wanted to lend. "I can't wait for it to dry. I'll get a job and leave here with my first paycheck," Elizabeth decided. In May, buses and cars started moving. Elizabeth went to work with the cows. Aunt Olivia also advised her to leave. "As long as you're alive and well, go away. You don't belong here in this family. You'll ruin yourself, or you'll get drunk like them." And then came the long-awaited paycheck. For a week, Elizabeth gathered her small belongings, received the settlement, took the workbook and characteristic from the place of work. She happily hurried home. In the morning, she decided to leave. She didn't tell anyone about her plans. Jack didn't care about her. He'd been on a bender for a week. Her father and mother were living their own lives. Her sister had had another fling with a man and left for a neighboring village, taking her children with her. But Barbara was on the alert. She watched Elizabeth as she did her laundry and put away her clothes. The bus that passed through their village passed by every other day, in the morning at 77.30. Elizaveta had prepared a bag from the evening. At the bottom, she put all the money and documents. She went out into the yard, went into the bathhouse, then returned to the house. Barbara wasn't there. While Elizaveta was washing, she did not notice how she had slipped to the gate. Her bag was under the bed. She had not bought any new things, some of them worn out, some better ones taken by her sisters. She picked up the bag and was glad that it was light. It would not be so heavy on the way. She lay down on her bed and thought for the first time how she would live her life. She was ashamed to return home in front of her relatives for her marriage. She was also afraid of her grandmother's reaction, her judgmental eyes. Leslie might still understand, but Grandma, I wonder what her classmates would think. Probably condemn her. And Anna, her favorite teacher? Soon she fell asleep. In the morning at 6 o'clock, having milked the cows and filtered the milk, she went into the house. Everyone was asleep. She looked longingly at Barbara's children. She especially liked the boy. She played with him more often and felt sorry for him. Glancing at her watch, Elizabeth drank a glass of milk and bread, took her bag and quickly left the house. The bus arrived on time. Elizabeth was the only passenger on the bus. The chauffeur said, "You will pay. There will sit the controller." Elizaveta sat down and nodded off. It was 60 kilometers to the next stop. The controller got on the bus and they drove off. After chatting with the driver for another 20 minutes, she decided to pick up the passengers. Feeling a hand on her shoulder, Elizabeth woke up. "Pay the fare," she heard. Elizabeth quickly unzipped her bag and was stunned. Everything in the bag was torn. There was no money. Her employment card and characteristic were torn and crumpled. There were some things missing. Elizaveta felt sick. She turned pale. "Maybe when I was milking the cows," she thought. "I'm sorry, I don't have any money," she whispered. Then why did she get on the bus? But it was there. Someone had taken it. There was disapproval on the bus. The controller asked the driver to stop and let Elizabeth off. The girl stayed on the road. The bus, dusting, quickly disappeared. Despair gripped Elizabeth. She sat down on the grass on the side of the road and, dazed, sat for 2 hours. During that time, no one passed in either direction. It was morning. The weather promised to be hot. The sun had already risen above the trees. The air was intoxicating. Meadow grasses were blooming, thinning a light fragrance. Coniferous trees of rich green color stood in a wall along the road. How beautiful nature is here, and how lonely and bad I am here, Elizabeth thought. There was no one to go back to, and there was no way to get home. No food, no money, and so far away. Tears streamed down her cheeks. What have I done? I've ruined my own life. She realized that Barbara had taken the money and things. There was no way I was going back, so I had to go forward. Elizabeth got up and walked down the road following the bus. She walked for quite a long time. It must have been about 2 or 3 in the afternoon when she heard some movement behind her. A tractor trailer was catching up with Elizabeth. It was driven by a man in his 60s. "How far are you going, girl?" "I'd like to go to the railroad station." "And when will you get there?" laughed the man. "It can't be helped. The bus will be only the day after tomorrow," said Elizaveta. "You should sleep less, then you wouldn't be late. Get on the trailer. I'll take you there, and it's about 80 kilometers to the station. The buses run more often there." The man smoked, and after waiting for Elizaveta to get on, started on his way. On the outskirts of the village he stopped. "I don't want to get into trouble with the police, so I'll go on my own." "It's not far," said the tractor driver. "The station is still 80 kilometers away." Whether she would be able to get there without incident, she did not know. The girl was glad that the night would not catch her either in the field or in the forest. When she reached the bus station, she learned that the bus would be at 10 a.m. She was afraid to go in the dark. There was nowhere to sleep. And what was the point of waiting for the bus? She had no money anyway. It was getting evening. The cashier closed the cash register and left. Elizabeth stayed alone in the room that was considered a bus station. "I have to close the bus station. It's time for you to leave." "There won't be any buses," said the cleaning lady. "Close it with me, please," asked Elizaveta. I got off the bus. I have no acquaintances or relatives here. No hotel in the village either. I don't know what to do, and I'm afraid to spend the night on the street." The woman, thinking that there was nothing to steal, agreed. After locking Elizaveta up, she quietly went home. It was tough sleeping on the bench. No comforts, and she didn't need them. Since morning she had eaten nothing, only drank water from the column. The girl expected to have lunch at the station in the cafeteria, buy a ticket and groceries for the train. But it happened that there was no station, no groceries, no train, and no money. What is waiting for me? How do I go on? She was terrified. In the morning, the cleaning lady opened the door. Elizaveta thanked her, went out quickly, did not wait for the bus, left without asking anything. Elizaveta did not know what to do next. Borrow money from someone, but who would give it to her? To go to look for a job, but where to live and what to eat before the paycheck. She saw a column, went up, washed her face and drank water. She asked a passerby for directions and walked. She had to get to the railroad station by all means, and then what would happen? She was lucky. There was a milk truck on the road, and she raised her hand. The driver, a young guy smiling with a sense of humor, was on his way to the dairy. It turned out to be on the way. Only girl, please don't be silent and sing something for the fare. Where are you going, birdie? To the railroad station. Going somewhere else? I guess you're going to enroll. Where to, if it's no secret? Wherever they'll accept you, Elizabeth answered. I can't understand you girls. Always want something, always dreaming of something. Live more simply, and it will be sweeter, he said and laughed. This relaxed conversation reminded Elizabeth of another life, not the one she had had for the last year. She felt better, her mood lifted. Where's the song? Elizabeth had never sung for the last year. She had even forgotten that there was such a statement she wanted to sing. She thought for a while and chose the same song about her mother that she had heard from Jack. The chauffeur liked it, and she was a little distracted from her thoughts, but the feeling of uncertainty, the insecurity, the fear of the unknown. The guy's name was Jacob. He looked at his watch and said, I'm on time to take you to the station. May you be lucky enough to get in. This simple kindness filled her soul so much that she wanted to kiss the guy. She was very happy. She had never imagined that she would get to the station so quickly and safely. Elizabeth stood in front of the station. Lord, help me, she prayed. The bus would arrive at night, and the parking lot would be 2 minutes. Feverish thoughts flashed through the girl's mind. How to sit down without a ticket. It would take 6 days to get there. It would be possible to use electric trains for short distances, but there are no electric trains here, and the trains are every other day. What to do? Where to get money? An empty bottle caught her eye. She decided to collect all the bottles she could find, turn them in, and get a ticket for as much money as she could afford. But there were hardly any bottles at the station. She found only 2. There was a glass recycling center nearby. They gave her 24 cents. At the station, she bought a bun and tea. Hunger was making itself felt, for she had not eaten for 2 days. The evening was approaching, and with it the arrival of the train. Elizabeth decided to ask the conductors, in case they could persuade her, though it was unlikely. The train arrived without delay. The girl ran to the open doors and tearfully begged and pleaded. Wow, you've got a lot of claims, the young, slender conductor told her. I don't know who you are and why you're going to Washington without a ticket. Maybe you're going to jail, and I'm responsible. The car door closed, and with it the possibility of leaving disappeared. The train was moving fast. She went to the station, sat down on a bench, and spent the night like that. The next day there was no train. Elizabeth hung around the nearby streets, waiting for the next train. Maybe she'll be lucky, she thought. This day she managed to collect more bottles, as many as 5. She turned them in and even had lunch in the canteen. Enough for half a portion of soup and tea. On a neighboring table, people left 2 slightly bitten pieces of bread. She took them. The second day of waiting was the same. At night, the Moskovsky arrived. It was impossible to leave. God, what to do? What to do? She sat on a bench on the platform and wrapped her arms around her head. A hobo walked by with a bag full of empty bottles. The man was drunk. Elizabeth secretly envied him. Across 2 platforms stood a freight train with tanks labeled gasoline. The track workers going around the train were banging the wheels of the cars with hammers. In the middle, right in front of Elizabeth, was a wagon with a vestibule, open on all sides. Elizabeth sat staring dumbly in front of her. The selector announced the arrival of the train. If only someone had lost his wallet, Elizabeth dreamed. All kinds of ridiculous thoughts visited her poor head. The passenger train left. The lights on the semaphore flickered. It was announced that 217 was to be sent from the 3rd track. This told the girl nothing. Suddenly, Elizabeth saw the man move away from his bottles. She, like a she-wolf, rushed at her prey, grabbed the valise. One of the bottles fell out and crashed to the pavement with a crack. The man woke up and rushed to Elizabeth. She grabbed the bottles in the bag and rushed forward. At that time, the freight train began to move slowly, and the man managed to grab her by the sleeve of her blouse. You bitch. She rushed forward. A piece of sleeve remained in his hands. Having reached the car, She threw her bag in the vestibule, but the bottles could not pull out of the clinging hands of the man. The girl managed to jump on the step. The train was gaining speed. The man angrily threw the bottle at Elizabeth. She felt a strong pain in her head. Her ears rang. She climbed into the car, fell to her knees, tore her left one in blood, and lost consciousness. She woke up in the evening. The sun was already setting, and the train was rushing and rushing. She felt a strong pain in her head. Blood caked behind her ear. Her back ached. Her left knee burned. And the train kept rushing and rushing at full sail, clanking and jerking. The wind fluttered her hair mercilessly. It was chilly. It was dark night. Elizabeth was no longer crying. She cursed her rash decision, Jack, her first love, and her weakness. Why didn't I go to the police? Why hadn't I reported my situation? I was so worried about him. I didn't want him to be disturbed, and he probably forgot about me. Why am I so stupid? The train had been running nonstop all night, and the sun was already shining, but he kept going. Perhaps it stopped somewhere, but our traveler fell into a deep sleep. No one disturbed her. No one knew about the passenger of the freight train. Elizabeth woke up with thirst and sucking pain in her stomach. We'd approached some kind of a junction. The train stopped, and she decided to get off. There was a box in a small house by the tracks. Perhaps she could find out where the train was going and get something to eat. She walked slowly towards the house. There was a girl of about 10 years old playing outside. "Is Mommy home?" Elizabeth asked. "No. She went with Derek to Grandma's. Grandma is sick, and they didn't take me. They need someone to look after the house, and Daddy's at work." Elizabeth asked the girl to give her some water and some bread. "But don't go in the house. You're dirty, and you might steal something. I'll bring it to you myself." Elizabeth grinned bitterly. "Wow, people are already afraid of me." The girl soon brought a piece of bread and a half-liter can of milk. Elizabeth sat down on the stump and ate everything greedily. The girl also brought her a mirror and a bucket of water. Elizabeth cleaned herself up as best she could. Her hair was greasy, covered in locomotive soot, and her face was grimy. Elizaveta hastily washed her hands, face, and feet and asked for a bottle of water to take with her. The lights flashed on the semaphore, and Elizaveta was in the carriage in no time. The train was gaining momentum. "Where am I going? Why?" So she traveled another day. In the evening, she realized from the names of the stations that she was going somewhere in Canada. She got scared. Where am I going? What am I going to do next? At 5 a.m., she saw a big city. It was the Republican Center. It was warm and very beautiful. The sun was coming out of the mountains. The train stopped. She slowly crawled out of her hiding place. She looked at her dress. Dirty, with a torn piece on the shoulder. How could she go out in public like that? Still, Elizabeth went, entered the station, found the women's restroom. On the sink lay laundry soap. Elizabeth happily washed herself and drank plenty of water. Her left knee was swollen and a little pus. She washed the wound, took off her dress, and threw it in the trash. From her bag, she took out a sweatshirt and a pair of sports tights. Once dressed, the girl walked out into the waiting room and approached the information desk. "How much is a ticket to Washington, and on what train is better to get there?" There was no money. Elizabeth inquired if there was any work at the station. Anything, no matter. But there were no vacancies. She walked through the neighboring yards, wanted to get a job as a janitor or cleaner, but even here she had no luck. She was afraid to go far from the station. The station was her hope of returning home. She had to collect bottles again, enough for a bun and a cake and tea. She could drink as much water as she wanted from the tap in the toilet, and it already seemed happiness to her. 2 days passed. On the 3rd day in the evening, the lady on duty at the station came to Elizaveta and asked her why she was not leaving and asked her to show her ticket. Elizabeth was unable to answer anything. The policeman on duty would have to be called in to detain her. Someone distracted the woman. Elizabeth, having seized the moment, hid in the crowd of people going out on the platform. On the tracks was boarding the train. Elizaveta stood in the crowd between 8 and 9 cars. The conductors were talking to each other. "Is your car reserved?" "Yes, the passengers from the rest home will board at 2. Minors, their families, so I'm free for now." In car 9, the boarding doors didn't open. The conductress from the 9th carriage was chatting with the conductress from the 8th carriage. Both were young, funny and laughing about something of their own. 5 minutes to departure came from the selector. The 8-car conductor, having boarded her passengers, asked her friend to come to her for a moment. Elizabeth, with the speed of a wildcat, climbed into the 8-car and quickly snuffed through the vestibule into the 9. Ducking down, she ran a little through the car, snuck into the first open compartment and lurked, so as not to rattle anything. I climbed onto the second shelf, then onto the third, where luggage is usually placed, lay down and hid. Soon I heard footsteps. Both conductresses walked along the corridor, looked into the compartment. Elizabeth was not noticed. The door clicked and the compartment was closed. How good it is to serve the compartment. But I like the parlor car, where everything is in plain sight, but there is more dirt. Let's have lunch in your carriage. The girls from 6 and 7 will be here. We'll sit till the next station, it's not that far. We'll be there around evening. Come on, go to your carriage and invite them. Elizabeth heard everything. Both were afraid to sneeze or give themselves away. Soon the laughing and talking were over. The company dispersed and Elizabeth fell into a deep sleep. The girl woke up with a click in the lock. The conductress opened the compartment. Boarding will begin soon, Elizabeth realized. Nightmare, what awaits me? What will happen next? Everything froze inside her. Her heart pounded hard. The veins in her head pulsed. The train was slowing down. The cars creaked and braked at the next station. The selector announced boarding. Elizabeth was close to fainting. And now she heard talking, shuffling feet, laughter. The door of her compartment opened. 4 girls ran in. The first 2 were about 67 years old, the second about 23. 2 young women came in after them. One of them was taller, full, and black, the other short, blonde. They were escorted in by a large man. He kissed the small woman and asked her to say hello to her brother and invited everyone to come more often. They had a little luggage, fruit, melons, watermelons, and 2 buckets of apricot jam. The black woman took the 2 girls and left the compartment. I've already washed mine, she laughed when she came back. Now it's your turn. The blonde woman left with hers for a while. Then, having settled down, the women began to set the table. The guy brought tea. Blackie said, "Come on, girls, let's eat and go to bed. The older ones will fit on the second shelves, and the little ones with their mothers on the lower ones." The compartment was closed so that the little ones would not run out into the corridor. Elizabeth pressed herself against the wall as hard as she could, her heart pounding frantically. She waited for her fate and realized that she could not escape the moment when she would be discovered. She lay in her hiding place and watched the passengers. Not a word, not a movement of the women escaped her. The dark-haired one was more severe. The other, on the contrary, was soft and smiling, with a kind of unknown warmth emanating from her. Meanwhile, everyone sat down at the table. They cut the odoriferous melon, took out other food. The compartment smelled pleasant and appetizing. Elizabeth hadn't eaten anything for 24 hours, and she felt a little dizzy. One of the little girls looked up and their eyes met. The girl cried, clung to her mother, pointing her finger at Elizabeth and screamed, "Mommy, I'm afraid." Elizabeth was discovered. "How do you think you're going to get home?" Maria asked. "I don't know. I don't have a penny, and it's a long way to Washington," Elizabeth said. Suddenly a thought awakened her mind. Looking at Maria, she asked quietly, "Could you give me $50? I would send it to you at once. Write me your address. I won't cheat, I promise." Leslie shook her head disapprovingly. "Oh, that kind of money. It would be better if we took you to a guide." Elizabeth noticed Leslie's beautiful gold rings, a wide chain, and intricate, massive earrings. One rarely wore so much gold in those days. Not everyone wore wedding bands. Maria calmly remarked, "You know, I thought I should have told the conductor yesterday. Now it's too late. We'll still be guilty for hiding. Come on, get upstairs and cover yourself. They'll be here soon." It was still 13 hours to Karaganda. Leslie and her children were to be met by her husband, Maria's brother, so they were both waiting for the meeting. Elizabeth spent the whole day on the top luggage rack. The women fed her and helped her out if necessary. Maria had been brooding since the morning. When Elizabeth went to the bathroom, she spoke. "Let's give her that $50. "What are you doing?" she objected. "I'm dreaming of an accident-free trip. If it worked for you and your pity, she would have been in the police a long time ago. Don't you feel sorry for her? You can't pity everyone." Maria thought again. Something in her soul told her that this girl was in trouble, that if they did not help her, there was no telling what would happen. Where could fate throw her? Maybe to prison, Or maybe she would be raped and killed. The thought of it made her uncomfortable. Leslie, I think I'm gonna give her some money. What, do you have a little extra? If you don't want anything, buy it for your kids or your husband. Why don't you get your mother-in-law or sister-in-law a present? You can see she's a crook. At that moment, Elizabeth came in and climbed upstairs. She heard Leslie's last words, and she felt sorry for herself. She felt silent. Her thoughts were not happy. That was how they traveled halfway through the day. The girls seemed to have forgotten all about her. They played merrily. Near Karaganda at the sorting station, Maria said, "I'll give you $50. Of course, it would be nice if you would come and show me the ticket." She took out her purse, took out $50 from her wallet, wrote down her address and handed it to Elizaveta. Elizaveta could not believe her eyes and ears, took the money and began to thank Maria. "Well, Maria, you're a fool. At least do not tell your husband that you lend money to anyone." On the platform, Leslie and the children met her husband. Everyone came out of the compartment. Mary was happy to see her brother, the girls were frolicking, and Elizabeth ran to the station. She whirled into the building. 3 ticket offices were open. The 4th was closed. Elizabeth stood at the 3rd ticket office. She wanted to be able to show Marie her ticket in time. There were not so many people, but the service was slow. Behind the window of the 4th ticket office, she saw movement. One man was there at once. Elizabeth was the second. The 2 ticket booths closed, and passengers rushed to take the line again, cursing at the inconvenience. All the way to Washington, coach 1. Only general seats left to Washington. Do you want to take it? Yes, let's take the general. Elizabeth was happier than she had ever been in her life. She still had money left, and she wanted to pay it back to reduce her debt. Running out onto the platform, she saw the train gaining momentum. Maria will probably think badly of me, she was upset. She stood for a while longer, then began to prepare to leave. She went to the store, bought herself a simple chintz dress and groceries for the road. She wanted to go to a bathhouse, but she could not find one nearby, and she was afraid to go far from the station in case she got lost and would not catch the train. She spent the night at the station, and in the morning she got into her car, took the second shelf, and happily lay down on the hard surface. It was going to be a long journey, but now she was not afraid of anything. She had a ticket, groceries, and still had $3.74 left. She was a rich woman. In the common carriage, the passengers were changing quickly. She did not hesitate to collect the remaining bottles and put them under the bottom seat. One of the women forgot her bag in the carriage. When she arrived in Washington, D.C., she had a lot of bottles. They rattled every time she moved, but Elizabeth was not ashamed of it. She had to live somehow. The girl at the kiosk turned in the containers, and her budget was replenished. She walked along the platform in the station, again collected bottles that no one needed, and again took them to the kiosk. She spent the night at the station, and in the morning Elizabeth arrived at the university where she had submitted her documents for admission last year. August was approaching. The 1st of August began the entrance exams. In the admissions office, Elizabeth asked about her documents. The secretary looked at her strangely, went somewhere, and only an hour later brought a cardboard binder. "Why didn't you take the exams last year?" "It just happened." "If you're going to enter this year, bring your employment history for the last year and a character reference from your last place of work." Remembering her shredded papers, Elizaveta quietly replied, "I think I'll take my documents. I don't have a characterization, and there is no one to write it." The woman was surprised, but there was no time to question Elizaveta. More and more applicants were coming. The competition numbered about 10 people per place. Elizaveta realized that there were enough applicants without her with her problems and unpreparedness. After leaving the institute, she sat down on a bench. What to do next? She was afraid of her grandmother. She thought she would be misunderstood. She didn't return the money either. She was afraid of meeting acquaintances, afraid of being questioned. 2 girls sat next to her. It was obvious from their simple clothes that they were both from the provinces. One of them said, "Mabel, I'm afraid we won't pass the competition. Even if we pass the exam, 10 people per place is too many. We don't know what's going to happen with the dorms. At the consultation, I realized that I am unfamiliar with a lot of things, although Veronica said at school that it would be easy for me to enter. I'm also afraid of not passing the competition. Let's try the library technical school. There is a small competition. 2 people per place. They promised to provide dormitory for all non-residents. My aunt told me." "Elizabeth, like a drowning man grasping at straws, grasped at the idea. "Girls, where is this library? Are you also afraid of not getting in?" "Yes, I am." And so Elizabeth is a student of the Library Technical School. She went to the director and explained why there is no labor or characteristic, but since she successfully passed the entrance exams, she was enrolled in the first course. The term of study: 3 years, a place in a dormitory, and a stipend of $10 a month. This in her situation could only dream of. Elizabeth studied easily. She soon liked librarianship. Teachers were pleased with her. It was a good school preparation. The only thing she had trouble with was clothes. Soon the cold weather would come, and she had neither warm clothes nor shoes. She didn't want to go home. It was a shame to arrive without money. Her relatives did not know that she was near, that it was very hard for her. She sent her last letter from Alaska in early June, saying that she was doing well. Money was tight, her scholarship was not enough, and she had little food. In the evenings, so that no one would see her, she would go out and collect bottles to make ends meet. The girls in the dormitory shunned her, but she was glad to have a roof over her head and a bed. It was October, the cold weather and the autumn rains were beginning. One day, standing at some entranceway to avoid getting wet, she noticed an announcement. Need a caregiver for an elderly woman. Apply to apartment number 7, Elizabeth. Without thinking for a long time, found the 7th apartment. She was opened by a woman of about 35 years old. According to the woman, there was a difficult situation in the family. Her mother-in-law lives alone. She is seriously ill and practically does not leave the house. Her relatives are far away. One of her sons is a military man, now somewhere in Afghanistan, and for 2 years there has been no news from him. The mother feels the uncertainty hard, and now there is a new blow. Her first son, the husband of Elizaveta's interlocutor, was killed in a traffic accident. He left behind a wife and 3 children. The youngest twins are only 4 months old. There is no one to help. It was agreed that Elizabeth would come after classes, go to the store, clean, cook, do laundry. When sick, stay overnight. Payment of $5 a month, more cannot, as the grandmother's pension of $12. Elizabeth agreed and was very happy. The roommates in the dormitory were skeptical about this news. Only one, Katia, understood: Elizaveta. She was familiar with the laws of hard life. 3 months passed. One night, Elizaveta had a dream about Maria. By this time, Elizabeth could only save $10. She kept Maria's address as the apple of her eye and knew it by heart. In the morning, she was in a terrible mood. What would she think of me? Probably that Leslie was right and I was a con artist. Days and months passed. Elizabeth was doing well in school. She didn't socialize with girls, didn't go to dances, didn't meet young men. She was grateful to her sick grandmother, Catherine, who gave her some clothes. All the clothes were good, but long out of fashion. Her grandmother's sister-in-law, Kimberly, also brought Elizabeth some of her own clothes that were too small for her. One day, as Elizabeth was collecting bottles at the suburban train station, someone called out to her, "Elizabeth, are you there?" In front of her stood her former classmate, well-dressed, with a beautiful handbag. She was finishing her 2nd year at the institute and was going home for the weekend. Elizabeth wanted to run away, but after thinking about it, she asked not to tell anyone about their meeting. Soon a young man showed up. The girl was worried that he would not see her in the company of a beggar and hurried to him. What a nightmare! What if Grandma finds out about me? Not that flashed through Elizabeth's mind. Time flies quickly, already the 1st year is over. For the summer, Elizabeth went to live with Catherine. 11 months after the adventure, Maria received a notice of transfer of $50. She didn't think about the money anymore and stopped waiting. On the receipt in the letter box, it said, "Dear Maria, sorry for the delay, EBT. Thank you, UUHELPD me ELIZABT. Good thing I wasn't wrong about her." Maria smiled and sent Leslie a postcard with only 2 words, "Debt paid back." The reply came back, "Really? Congratulations." Another year passed. Elizabeth went to Baba Catherine's house after class, as usual. As she entered the apartment, she saw Kimberly. The woman called Elizabeth for tea, thanked her for everything and said that they no longer needed her help. The children grew up a little, and they decided to live together. Catherine did not want to live away from her grandchildren. Elizaveta graduated from technical college. She worked in the library in the technical department. She was already 25 years old. She traveled to her family, paid her debt to her grandmother. Grandmother was in pretty good shape. The meeting turned out to be very touching. At first, of course, she scolded Elizabeth that she ran away without a marriage license, which brought shame on her gray head. But if you came to apologize, you should be forgiven. Then the grandmother was moved and again began to scold Elizaveta that she had wandered about the world and had not sent word for a long time, that she had grown too proud but had not asked for help, that she had been sitting at her side but had not shown her eyes at home. The lamentations and tears stretched far past midnight. On the morning came a new day, and joy settled in the house. A day later, Leslie arrived with her husband and 2 children. Elizabeth's life was getting better. She continued to work in her library, lived in the dormitory for working youth. Elizabeth did not even think about marriage. Young guys who looked at her shunned. She was happy with her existence. She could afford something, but when she saw a thrown bottle, she always wanted to pick it up. One day on the evening shift, a man about 32-35 years old came into the library and asked for a book on mechanics. He seemed familiar to her for some reason. His last name was quite common, Stone. There was already a card with the same last name in her box. She put the card on the stranger's card. He signed for the book he had received and walked out. Elizabeth noticed that the man's left hand was in a strange, unnatural position. She took out the first card, compared the pictures. They were very different. Strange, I haven't seen him anywhere, she thought. 10 days later he came again, changed the book for another, and left. He reminded Elizabeth of someone again, but her work distracted her and she forgot about him. When he came a third time, Elizabeth was sure she had seen him somewhere before. All evening she remembered and could not remember where she had met him before, and the man did not recognize her at all. 10 days later he appeared again in the library. He took a book on metal science. He stayed a little longer, looked at the contents, and went out. It was only at the end of the day that Elizabeth remembered. That's right, I saw his youthful picture on the dresser at Grandma Catherine's. How come I hadn't guessed it before? She was surprised. After all, the last name is the same, and she told me about him. And they had the same eyes. The next time she asked him about Grandma Catherine, they got to talking. Alan told her that his mother had died before she could see him. He is a career officer, was a prisoner of war in Afghanistan, was wounded in the left arm, for which he was written off and released from military service. He is disabled group 2 and now learns a new profession. They began to meet. Black Sea coast. A lot of vacationers. Under an umbrella settled a family. A little boy about 5 years old jumped and fell in the sand, brought water in a bucket and watered his mom and dad. He was having fun. Dad was watching someone. What did you see there? The wife asked. In the eyes of the husband flashed a playful light. Yes, a mermaid came out of the foam. I've been watching her for the second day. What beautiful eyes the girl has. You could drown in them faster than in the sea. And her mom is nice, attractive. I'll bet you that you're going to drown in someone's eyes. He heard his wife grumbling jokingly. She raised up on her elbow. Show me your mermaid. I'll go and turn her into a one-eyed daredevil so that she would not ruin the good young man, she giggled. As soon as she looked in the right direction, her face changed dramatically. She became serious, somehow gathered, stood up and quickly went to the woman and the girl. The husband got worried. Where are you going? I was joking. He wanted to stop her, but a sharp cry from the child made him look back. Maria was spreading a large towel on the sand. Hello, she heard behind her. Hello, Maria replied. In front of Maria stood a young unfamiliar woman in a dark green swimsuit. You must be mistaken, but hello anyway and have a nice day. Of course it's her. It's her voice, the same soft pronunciation. I've heard it more than once in my dreams. The unknown woman knelt down in front of Maria and asked, Have you ever given $50 in a train card to a hungry wanderer? Maria looked at the young woman carefully and remembered that poor girl. She couldn't remember how many years had passed since then, probably 10, maybe 15. Yes, she replied surprisingly she did. Alan couldn't hear them, but he saw the two women talking animatedly, interrupting each other, and the face of the young girl sitting next to them, the same mermaid, expressed surprise and slight shock. The man became nervous, but decided not to interfere. When Elizabeth came back, Alan noticed a change in her. He had never seen his wife's face like that before. Suddenly, Elizabeth fell to the sand and sobbed. She remembered everything, every detail. She was in a state that only a suffering person can experience. Alan was perplexed. "Elizabeth, my dear, what did she say to you? I will go and deal with her at once." Elizabeth raised herself up and barely managed to grab his hand. "Don't go, don't. You don't know anything." She never told anyone about herself. That day they did not swim, although the son was always reaching for the water. Alan learned what his wife had suffered in her youth. He was struck by the fact that she collected bottles at train stations, picked up a piece of bread left by someone. Having finished the story, Elizabeth calmed down a little, lay down on the sand. Silent, endless tears flowed down her cheeks. "No one will hurt you again. I will not allow," Alan said firmly, stroking his wife's hand affectionately. And a little aside, a girl with big, beautiful eyes asked in surprise, "Mommy, how come? You always taught us to think over our spending, to be careful about unfamiliar people. And you yourself gave such money to the first dirty girl you met." "You know, child," Maria said thoughtfully, "at night on the train, I realized at some point that it was my moral duty, a duty to help a person in need.